The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy that flows through star systems like an eternal river. For millennia, the Jedi spoke of balance, of light and dark in perpetual harmony. The Sith knew differently. Balance was a lie told by the weak. But neither order, neither philosophy, had ever conceived of what would happen when 7 beings from beyond the stars arrived with powers that answer to no force, no midichlorians, no ancient mystical energy at all. Powers that simply were, as fundamental and undeniable as gravity itself. The anomaly appeared without warning in the Hoth system's outer reaches, a kaleidoscope tear in reality that screamed with colors no natural phenomenon could produce. Rebel long-range sensors registered it first, a spatial distortion that defied every known hyperspace signature, every documented wormhole classification. The energy readings spiked so violently that Mon Mothma herself ordered 3 corvettes to investigate, fearing some new Imperial superweapon being tested in the system's remote ice fields. They never reached the coordinates. By the time the rebel ships arrived, the tear had collapsed, leaving only 7 distinct energy signatures scattered across Hoth's surface and low orbit, readings that made no sense whatsoever. Biological, technological, divine, impossible. The sensors couldn't agree on what they were detecting. One signature burned like a captive star, falling toward the ice plains with enough kinetic force to vaporize a mountain. Another moved with such velocity that it seemed to exist in 3 places simultaneously before vanishing into the lower atmosphere. A third pulsed with rhythmic technological precision, broadcasting on frequencies that predated the Old Republic. The remaining 4 dispersed across the frozen wastes, each radiating power signatures that made the Force itself seem to pause. As if recognizing something fundamentally other had entered its domain. In the Executor's meditation chamber, Darth Vader's eyes snapped open behind his mask. The respirator's rhythm broke for a single, sharp inhalation. He had sensed disturbances before, Jedi survivors, Force-sensitive children, even the Emperor's dark experiments. This was none of those. This was 7 holes punched through the fabric of the Force itself, 7 wounds that bled power into the galaxy from somewhere beyond his understanding. Not the dark side. Not the light. Something else entirely. Lord Vader, the comm crackled. We're detecting massive energy discharges in the Hoth system. Unknown origin. Multiple contact points. Assemble Death Squadron, Vader commanded, rising from his meditation sphere. I will investigate personally. My lord, our intelligence suggests the Rebel Alliance has established a presence in that system. This could be. I am aware. Vader's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. What has arrived in Hoth is far more significant than the rebellion. Prepare my shuttle. We leave immediately. The Sith Lord did not add what his instincts screamed with every fiber of his dark side-enhanced perception. Whatever had torn through the barriers between realities was powerful enough to shift the balance of the entire galaxy. And if the rebels reached it first, the Emperor's carefully constructed order would face a threat unlike any since the Clone Wars. On Hoth's surface, in a crater still glowing with residual heat, Superman pushed himself to his knees and immediately regretted it. The planet's twin suns, he could sense them even through the perpetual cloud cover, radiated energy that felt subtly wrong. Not harmful, but foreign, like trying to breathe water instead of air. His cells drank in the solar radiation but processed it sluggishly, as if his Kryptonian biology was struggling to adapt to a fundamentally different stellar spectrum. He rose to his full height, cape billowing in the sub-zero wind, and surveyed the alien landscape. Ice stretched to every horizon, broken only by jagged mountain ranges and the massive furrow his impact had carved across 2 kilometers of frozen plain. The sky churned with gray clouds that seemed to press down with unusual weight, and the air itself felt dense with something he couldn't identify, not pollution, not radiation, but a presence that made his skin prickle with awareness. League, he said, tapping the comm unit in his ear. Static. Batman, Diana, anyone respond. More static, then a fractured burst that might have been Cyborg's voice before dissolving into white noise. Either the communication systems were damaged, or something about this place interfered with their technology. Neither option was encouraging. Superman crouched, preparing to launch skyward, then stopped. His flight felt sluggish, his superspeed responding a half-second slower than it should. The realization struck him with uncomfortable clarity: he was operating at diminished capacity. Not powerless, he could still hear heartbeats echoing from the distant mountain caves, still see the molecular structure of the ice beneath his boots, but weaker than he'd been in years. The last time he'd felt this vulnerable was in the Phantom Zone, cut off from yellow sunlight entirely. A mechanical whine cut through his thoughts. 3 angular craft screamed overhead, banking hard as they circled his position. They looked nothing like Earth aircraft, all sharp angles and twin-pod design, with laser cannons swiveling to track his movement. Warning shots lanced into the ice 30 meters ahead, sending up geysers of flash-boiled steam. Superman raised his hands slowly, making no threatening moves. The scouts were clearly military, and until he understood where the Justice League had landed, starting an interstellar incident seemed unwise. One craft descended, hydraulics hissing as it settled onto the ice. A boarding ramp extended, and a figure emerged wearing white armor that gleamed even in Hoth's dim light. Unidentified being, a mechanically filtered voice announced, blaster rifle trained on Superman's chest. You will surrender and submit to Imperial custody. Resistance will be met with lethal force. Imperial. The word meant nothing to Clark, but the tone meant everything. Authority backed by overwhelming power, the casual assumption of obedience, the threat of violence delivered without emotion. He'd heard that tone before, from dictators and warlords across a dozen worlds. It never ended well. I'm not your enemy, Superman said carefully, keeping his hands visible. I'm lost, separated from my team. I just need information about where. Compliance is mandatory. You will. The stormtrooper never finished. A dark shape dropped from the scout craft's underbelly, landing between Superman and the Imperial soldier with predatory grace. A cape, black as the void between stars. A mask that reflected no light. A breathing apparatus that rattled with mechanical rhythm. And a presence that pressed against Superman's senses like a physical weight, cold, vast, and utterly merciless. Darth Vader had arrived. Leave us, Vader commanded. The stormtroopers hesitated only a moment before retreating to their craft, clearly relieved to escape whatever was about to unfold. The Sith Lord studied Superman in silence, head tilted slightly, as if listening to something only he could hear. You are not of this galaxy, Vader stated. Not a question. The Force does not touch you. Yet you radiate power that defies explanation. Superman tensed, recognizing a warrior when he faced one. The figure before him stood perfectly still, yet every instinct Clark possessed screamed danger. This was no ordinary soldier. This was something far more dangerous. I don't know what the Force is, Superman replied honestly. My team and I were pulled through some kind of dimensional rift. We're not here to cause trouble. We just want to understand what happened and find our way home. Home. Vader's respirator hissed. There is no home for you now. You are in the Galactic Empire, and your presence has already disrupted the natural order. The Emperor will wish to speak with you. You will come willingly, or I will bring you broken. The Sith Lord's hand rose, and Superman felt an invisible pressure slam into his chest, not physical force, but something that tried to grip his very essence and crush it. The sensation was profoundly wrong, like someone reaching into his soul. He staggered back a step, more from surprise than pain, and Vader's masked head tilted further, intrigued. Interesting. The Force cannot hold you. A lightsaber ignited with a snap hiss, bathing the ice in crimson light. Then I will subdue you the traditional way. Superman sighed. First day in a new universe, and he was already fighting Darth Vader on a frozen wasteland. Diana would never let him hear the end of this. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. Across Hoth's ice fields, 6 other heroes were having their own first encounters with a galaxy far, far away. And none of them would be simple. Batman's cowl interface flickered with corrupted data as he hung suspended in the cargo bay of what appeared to be a modified light freighter, hands bound with some kind of energy restraints that hummed with contained power. Not ideal circumstances, but he'd been in worse situations. The smuggler who'd pulled him from Hoth's upper atmosphere, a Rodian with green skin and multifaceted eyes, paced nervously while speaking rapid fire into a handheld communication device that looked like it belonged in a museum compared to Earth technology. "I'm telling you, Jabba will pay big for this one," the Rodian insisted in a language Batman's cowl translator was still struggling to decode. "Look at that armor. That belt. Those weapons. This is high-grade military tech, maybe even Imperial prototype gear. The Hutt collects this kind of stuff." Batman filed away every detail. Jabba, presumably a name, possibly a crime lord based on context. Imperial, the same faction those white-armored soldiers had belonged to. And apparently, his equipment was being mistaken for cutting-edge military technology, which told him this civilization's personal armament capabilities were less advanced than he'd assumed from their spacecraft. The freighter shuddered as it broke atmosphere, and through the viewport, Batman caught his first true glimpse of the galaxy he'd landed in. Stars scattered across the void in unfamiliar constellations, a massive ringed gas giant dominating the near distance, and in high orbit above Hoth, 3 wedge-shaped vessels that dwarfed anything in Earth's orbital infrastructure. Each ship bristled with weapons batteries and hull-mounted cannons, their surfaces swarming with smaller craft like wasps around a hive. Imperial Star Destroyers. The Cowl's combat analysis subroutine provided tactical breakdowns automatically, approximate length 1,500 meters, crew complement estimated 37,000, armament sufficient to reduce a planetary surface to slag. 3 of them, blockading the system with ruthless efficiency. Wherever the Justice League had landed, they'd arrived in the middle of a militarized zone under heavy occupation. "You understand me?" Batman asked in English, testing the waters. The Rodian jerked around, clearly startled that the prisoner was conscious. "I need information. Where are we? What year is this? What's the dominant government?" The Rodian laughed, a chittering sound that set Batman's teeth on edge. "You hit your head on the way down, friend. This is the Hoth system, year 3 ABY, and the Galactic Empire controls everything that matters. Now shut up before I stun you again. 3 ABY. After what event?" The designation meant nothing without context, but it established a calendar system. Batman filed it away and continued his analysis. The freighter's interior was functional but worn, components jury-rigged with obvious field repairs. The flight controls used manual interfaces rather than neural links or AI assistance. Weapons technology favored energy-based projectiles over kinetic rounds. And most telling, the Rodian kept glancing nervously at the Star Destroyers, suggesting even smugglers feared Imperial authority. A new voice crackled through the ship's comm system, sharp with authority and utterly humorless. "Unregistered freighter, this is Imperial checkpoint control. Transmit your identification codes immediately or be fired upon." The Rodian's confidence evaporated. He scrambled to the cockpit, fingers flying across controls that looked like they'd been salvaged from 3 different ships. "Transmitting now. This is the Corellian Dream, cargo hauler, just doing salvage work in the outer system. Your vessel matches the description of known rebel sympathizer transports. Prepare to be boarded for inspection." Batman's tactical mind shifted into overdrive. Rebel sympathizers, an insurgency, possibly justified given the Empire's authoritarian tone. Boarding parties meant stormtroopers, which meant an opportunity to gather intelligence. And if he timed it right, an opportunity to escape and locate the rest of the League. "I can help you," Batman said quietly. The Rodian spun around, antenna twitching with agitation. "Those restraints you put on me, They're not designed for someone with my training. I've been loose for the past 3 minutes, waiting to see what you'd do. To demonstrate, Batman flexed his wrists in a specific sequence he'd mapped out while hanging in the cargo bay. Exploiting the energy restraint's recharge cycle. The bindings flickered and died, sparking as their containment failed. He dropped to the deck in a crouch, cape spreading behind him like wings, and the Rodian stumbled backward with a yelp of alarm. "Don't stun me again," Batman warned, reading the smuggler's body language telegraphing his reach for the weapon on his belt. "The Imperials are about to board this ship. You have 2 choices: let them find your valuable cargo, and explain why you're trafficking in unknown military technology, or let me help you avoid a prison cell. Decide quickly." The Rodian's eyes darted between Batman and the viewport, where a Lambda-class shuttle was detaching from the nearest Star Destroyer, escorted by 4 TIE fighters that screamed through the void on impossibly tight trajectories. The smuggler's shoulders sagged in resignation. "What do you want?" "Information first," Batman said, moving to the cockpit and scanning the controls with practiced efficiency. "Tell me about this rebel alliance the Imperials mentioned. And tell me everything you know about what happened in this system in the last hour." 10 minutes later, when the Imperial boarding party mag-locked onto the freighter's hull, they found an empty cargo bay, a cowering Rodian smuggler babbling about equipment malfunctions, and no trace of the armored figure their sensors had flagged. Batman watched from the ventilation system overhead, recording everything with his cowl's enhanced optics. The stormtrooper's armor was plastoid composite, resilient but with visible weak points at the joints. Their blaster rifles used Tabana gas ignition, effective but with predictable recharge cycles. Their tactical coordination was mediocre, relying on overwhelming numbers rather than strategic positioning. And most importantly, they were searching for something specific. The boarding commander kept referencing unknown energy signatures and unidentified biological readings across the Hoth system. 7 of them, scattered across the planet and low orbit. The rest of the Justice League. Batman waited until the Imperials departed, then dropped back into the cargo bay. The Rodian had collapsed against a bulkhead, antenna drooping with relief. "How did you? Never mind. I don't want to know. Just get off my ship at the next port and we're even." "Not yet," Batman said. "You mentioned the Rebel Alliance has a base somewhere in this system. I need you to take me there." "Are you insane? The Empire just locked down Hoth. Nothing gets in or out without Imperial clearance." Batman's eyes narrowed behind the cowl. "Then I suggest you fly very carefully." Halfway across the frozen planet, the Flash vibrated through the hull of a rebel transport ship, phasing into the cargo hold with a technique that felt sluggish and uncertain compared to his normal speed. Whatever had happened during the dimensional crossing, his connection to the Speed Force was severely compromised. He could still move faster than anyone in this galaxy likely thought possible, but the effortless reality-bending physics he'd mastered on Earth were beyond his reach here. "Okay, Barry," he muttered to himself, surveying the transport's interior. "You've been stranded on alien worlds before. Find the team, figure out what happened, get home in time for dinner. Simple." The transport shuddered as it lifted off from a concealed hangar carved into Hoth's ice, joining a small convoy of similarly battered ships fleeing toward orbit. Through the viewport, Flash could see Imperial TIE fighters swarming like angry insects, firing on anything that moved. Several rebel craft exploded in brilliant fireballs, their shields overwhelmed by concentrated fire. A young woman in an orange flight suit stumbled past Flash, not seeing him in her panic to reach an escape pod. He grabbed her shoulder gently, and she screamed, spinning around with wide eyes. Where did you come from?" "Long story," Flash said with his trademark grin, trying to project calm despite the chaos. "Short version, I'm lost, you're evacuating, and I'm guessing those Empire guys are the bad guys here." The pilot stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "You don't know about the Empire. What asteroid have you been living under? They're destroying the base. Everyone who doesn't evacuate in the next 10 minutes is dead." Flash's expression hardened. Evacuation under fire. Civilians in danger. The galaxy might be different, but tyranny looked the same everywhere. Then let's make sure everyone gets out. Where's your command center? Command center is already destroyed. We're on our own. She turned back toward the escape pod, then hesitated. Wait, can you fight? We're losing ships faster than our escorts can protect them. If you've got any combat training at all. I'm pretty good in a fight, Flash said, which was possibly the understatement of the century. Point me toward the biggest threat. She pointed at a viewport where a massive wedge-shaped Star Destroyer was emerging from behind Hoth's larger moon, its turbolasers already tracking the fleeing rebel convoy. That. It's moving into position to cut off our escape vector. If it gets a clean firing solution, half the convoy is gone. Flash studied the ship, calculating trajectories and distances with speed-enhanced perception. Too far to reach by running, even if this galaxy's physics allowed him to run through space, which he doubted. But these rebel ships had to get past it somehow, and if there was one thing Barry Allen excelled at, it was improvising under pressure. Get everyone to the escape pods, he told the pilot. I've got an idea. What kind of idea? Flash grinned. The kind that sounds completely insane but somehow works anyway. It's kind of my specialty. On the rebel medical frigate Redemption, Wonder Woman opened her eyes to find herself surrounded by 4 armed guards pointing weapons at her head with expressions that mixed fear and awe in equal measure. She lay on a medical bed in what appeared to be a ship's infirmary, her armor intact but her weapons conspicuously absent. The lasso of truth hung on a nearby equipment rack, glowing faintly with divine energy that clearly made the guards nervous. She's awake, one guard shouted into a comm unit. Tell Commander Skywalker we need him down here now. Wonder Woman sat up slowly, hands visible and non-threatening. The guards tensed but didn't fire, which showed more discipline than she'd expected. I am Diana of Themyscira, she said calmly. I mean you no harm. My companions and I were pulled through a dimensional gateway against our will. We seek only information and safe passage. An older guard, gray-haired and wearing a rebel insignia, studied her with calculating eyes. Dimensional gateway. Right. And I suppose you're from some distant system we've never heard of? I am from Earth, Diana replied truthfully. A planet that does not exist in your star charts, because it resides in an entirely different universe. I understand this is difficult to believe, but... Actually, it's not that hard to believe, a new voice interrupted. A young man entered the infirmary, blonde-haired and wearing black combat gear with a lightsaber hanging at his belt. Despite his youth, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd seen combat repeatedly. I've felt disturbances in the Force before. Never anything like what happened an hour ago. 7 tears in reality, each one bleeding power that shouldn't exist. Wonder Woman's eyes narrowed. You sense power. Are you a sorcerer? Jedi, the young man corrected, extending a hand cautiously. Luke Skywalker. And before you ask, yes, I can feel that you're different from anything I've ever encountered. Your weapon, he gestured toward the lasso of truth. It radiates something that's not the Force, but similar. Old magic, maybe. Primal. Diana allowed herself a small smile. You have sharp senses, young Jedi. The lasso is a gift from Hephaestus, forged with the essence of truth itself. It compels honesty from all who are bound by it. Luke's eyes widened. You're saying your weapon is powered by truth itself? Not technology or the Force, but an abstract concept made physical. Magic and divine power are no more abstract than this Force you speak of, Diana countered. All are manifestations of the fundamental energies that shape reality. Before Luke could respond, the frigate shuddered violently. Alarms blared throughout the ship, and the lighting shifted to emergency red. A voice crackled over the intercom, all hands, brace for impact. TIE fighters incoming on attack vector 7. Luke's hand went to his lightsaber instinctively, and Wonder Woman was off the medical bed in a heartbeat. "My weapons," she demanded. "If this ship is under attack, I will help defend it." The guards looked to Luke, who hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Give her the lasso and the bracers. Keep the sword for now, I want to see what she can do with less lethal options first." Wonder Woman caught the lasso as it was tossed to her, the familiar weight settling into her hands like greeting an old friend. She secured it to her belt and rolled her shoulders, testing her range of motion. These people feared her, but they weren't unreasonable. That was a start. "Tell me who we're fighting," she said to Luke as they moved toward the bridge at a run. "The Galactic Empire," Luke replied grimly. "Tyrannical regime that's controlled the galaxy for over 2 decades. They destroyed the Jedi Order, enslaved entire species, and built superweapons capable of obliterating planets. We're the Rebel Alliance, freedom fighters trying to restore the Republic." Diana's jaw tightened. She'd fought tyrants across many worlds. This would be no different. They burst onto the bridge to find chaos. Tactical displays showed the convoy under heavy fire, shields failing across multiple ships. The Star Destroyer was moving into position with terrifying precision, its turbolasers carving through rebel escorts like a knife through parchment. And in the midst of it all, impossible to miss on the sensors, was a signature that radiated solar intensity. "What is that?" Luke breathed, pointing at the display. Diana's heart soared with recognition. "That is Kal-El of Krypton. You would call him Superman." She turned to the frightened bridge crew with the smile of a warrior who just found her army. "And if he's here, the others won't be far behind." The question was whether they'd all survive long enough to reunite. Darth Vader's lightsaber carved through the air with precision that transcended mere swordsmanship, each strike guided by decades of combat mastery and the dark side's cruel efficiency. Superman dodged and weaved, his reduced speed still more than sufficient to avoid the crimson blade, but the Sith Lord adapted with unsettling quickness. Vader wasn't simply attacking, he was learning, studying Superman's movement patterns, testing his limitations with the cold calculation of a predator sizing up unfamiliar prey. "You fight like no warrior I have encountered," Vader observed, his respirator punctuating each word with mechanical rhythm. "Your speed is formidable, but you hold back. You fear your own power." Superman caught the lightsaber blade between his palms, the plasma edge screaming against his invulnerable skin. The heat was intense even for him, and the weapon's energy signature felt fundamentally wrong, not radiation or fire, but contained physics-defying plasma stabilized by technology he couldn't begin to understand. "I don't fear my power," Clark replied evenly. "I fear what happens when I stop controlling it." Vader tilted his head, genuinely intrigued. "Control is an illusion. There is only power and those strong enough to wield it." The Sith Lord gestured with his free hand, and the ice beneath Superman's feet exploded upward in massive shards, each piece accelerating toward him with bone-shattering force. Superman released the lightsaber and swept his arms in a wide arc, shattering the ice projectiles into harmless powder. But the attack was a feint. Vader was already moving, his cape billowing as he closed distance with impossible speed. The lightsaber thrust toward Superman's throat, and Clark twisted aside at the last instant, feeling the plasma blade singe his suit's cape. "Impressive," Vader acknowledged. "But you tire. This galaxy's suns do not nourish you as your home star did. I can sense your weakness growing." He was right. Superman could feel his cells struggling to process the unfamiliar stellar radiation, his normally limitless reserves depleting faster than they should. A prolonged fight would favor Vader, who showed no signs of fatigue. Clark needed to end this quickly or disengage entirely. "I didn't come here to fight you," Superman said, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "I don't even know what your conflict is about. My team and I are lost, separated, and trying to understand where we are. If you just—" "There is no negotiation," Vader interrupted. "The Emperor has foreseen your arrival. He knows what you represent, a disruption to the natural order, a variable that threatens everything we have built. You will submit to Imperial custody, or you will be eliminated as a threat to galactic stability. Superman's eyes narrowed. That's not going to happen. Then you leave me no choice. Vader extended both hands, and the very air around Superman seemed to constrict. Not physical force, but something else, that same invasive presence he'd felt earlier, trying to grip his essence and crush it from within. The pressure intensified, and for a moment, Superman actually felt his breath catch. Not from the force itself, which couldn't directly affect his Kryptonian biology, but from the sheer telekinetic power Vader was directing at the air around him, creating a localized vacuum. Superman's heat vision lanced out in twin beams of coherent solar energy, forcing Vader to break concentration and dodge. The Sith Lord's cape ignited where the beams grazed it, and he patted out the flames with casual disdain. Interesting. You weaponize stellar radiation. Vader's respirator hissed with what might have been satisfaction. You are indeed no ordinary being. Before either could continue the engagement, a massive shadow passed overhead. Both combatants looked up to see a gargantuan wedge-shaped vessel descending through the cloud cover, far larger than the scout ships that had first arrived. The Star Destroyer's underbelly bristled with docking bays, weapons emplacements, and sensor arrays that tracked both fighters with predatory precision. The Executor, Vader stated simply. My flagship. You have demonstrated sufficient threat to warrant overwhelming response. Superman's enhanced hearing picked up the whine of charging weapons batteries, dozens of them, all targeting his position. The tactical situation had just become untenable. He could probably survive the initial barrage, but not without revealing more of his capabilities than seemed wise. And somewhere on this frozen planet, his friends were scattered and vulnerable. This isn't over, Superman said, and launched himself skyward with enough force to crack the ice beneath his feet. He accelerated toward the upper atmosphere, fighting against sluggish flight that felt like moving through molasses. The Star Destroyer's turbolasers tracked him, emerald bolts of energy lancing through the sky in a web of destruction. Vader watched the alien warrior disappear into the clouds, making no move to pursue. The being called Superman was powerful, certainly, but wounded and weakening with every moment in this galaxy. He would be found again. And next time, the Emperor himself would decide his fate. Lord Vader, a voice crackled through his comlink. We've detected 6 additional anomalous signatures across the planet. Shall we deploy ground forces? Negative, Vader replied, already moving toward his shuttle. These beings are connected. If we capture one, the others will come to us. Focus all efforts on locating and containing the scattered targets. I want them alive and separated. As his shuttle lifted off, Vader reached out through the Force, feeling the distortions the 7 strangers created simply by existing in this galaxy. They were wounds in the natural order, tears in the fabric of reality itself. Dangerous. Unpredictable. And if properly controlled, potentially the most powerful weapons the Empire had ever wielded. The Emperor would be most pleased. Aquaman surfaced from beneath the ice sheet, gasping as frigid water cascaded off his Atlantean armor. The underground lake system he discovered ran for kilometers beneath Hoth's frozen surface, heated by geothermal vents that supported an entire ecosystem of blind, translucent creatures. He tried to communicate with them through his telepathy, hoping to gather information about the planet's geography, but the response had been overwhelming, alien minds that functioned on principles completely foreign to Earth marine life. He pulled himself onto a narrow ice shelf, trident clutched in one hand, and surveyed the cavern around him. Massive ice formations hung from the ceiling like frozen teeth, and in the distance, he could hear the echo of machinery, rhythmic, industrial sounds that suggested intelligent habitation. If there were people here, they might have answers about where the Justice League had landed. A roar echoed through the cavern, and Aquaman spun toward the sound. Something massive was moving through the tunnels. He could feel the vibrations through the ice, smell the predator's musk on the stale air. Whatever lived in these caves was big, territorial, and had just noticed an intruder in its domain. The creature that burst through the tunnel wall was unlike anything on Earth. It stood 4 meters tall, covered in white fur matted with ice, with curved horns and claws designed for rending flesh. A wampa, though Aquaman had no name for it yet. The ice predator bellowed a challenge and charged with surprising speed for something its size. Aquaman sidestepped the initial rush, using the creature's momentum against it to guide its charge past him. He brought the trident around in a controlled arc, not to kill but to warn. The blow struck the wampa's shoulder with enough force to stagger it, and the creature wheeled around with newfound respect in its eyes. "I don't want to hurt you," Aquaman said calmly, though he doubted the beast understood language. "I'm just passing through. Find easier prey." The wampa growled low in its throat, intelligence flickering behind those predatory eyes. It was considering whether the fight was worth the risk. Aquaman held his ground, trident leveled, projecting calm authority the way he would with sharks or orcas. Predators respected strength and confidence, it was a universal constant across worlds. Before the standoff could resolve, voices echoed from deeper in the cavern. Human voices, speaking in that same strange language he'd heard from the pilots earlier. The wampa's ears perked up, and it loped away toward the sounds with disturbing hunger. Aquaman cursed and followed at a run. He emerged into a larger chamber to find the wampa cornering 3 figures against the far wall, 2 wearing insulated suits marked with an unfamiliar insignia, 1 in orange flight gear. The creature was toying with them, relishing their fear before the kill. One of the suited figures held some kind of energy weapon. But his hands shook too badly to aim. Aquaman's trident left his hand in a perfect throw, crossing 30 meters in a heartbeat. The weapon struck the wampa's shoulder and pinned it to the ice wall, the prongs sinking deep into frozen stone. The creature howled and thrashed, unable to pull free. Aquaman crossed the distance in long strides, placed one hand on the beast's skull, and projected a single, overwhelming command through his telepathy: sleep. The wampa's eyes rolled back, and it slumped into unconsciousness. Not dead, not permanently harmed, but removed as a threat. Aquaman retrieved his trident and turned to face the 3 stunned humans, who stared at him like he'd materialized from their nightmares. "Does anyone speak English?" Aquaman tried. Blank stares. He sighed and pointed to himself. "Arthur Curry. Aquaman. Friend." He gestured to them questioningly. The one in flight gear recovered first, a young woman with sharp eyes and military bearing. She said something rapid-fire in her language, then tried again more slowly, pointing to a device on her wrist. After a moment of adjustment, the device spoke in accented but comprehensible English, translation matrix engaged. "You saved us. Thank you. I am Wedge Antilles, rebel pilot." What, are you?" "Long story," Aquaman replied, grateful for the translation technology. "My team and I were pulled into your galaxy by accident. I've been wandering these caves trying to find civilization. Looks like I found you instead." Wedge and his companions exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. Finally, Wedge spoke again. "Your timing is incredible. The rebel base is under Imperial assault. We were separated from our unit during the evacuation and got lost in the ice tunnels. If you hadn't arrived," he trailed off, not needing to finish the sentence. "Imperial assault?" Aquaman's expression hardened. "Your people are under attack." "Everyone's under attack," one of the other rebels muttered bitterly. "The Empire found the base. They're destroying everything: ships, personnel, equipment. Most of the fleet already evacuated, but stragglers like us are trapped planetside with TIE fighters hunting us down." Aquaman had heard enough. Whatever political situation he'd landed in, the immediate facts were clear: one side was conducting a military assault, and the other was desperately evacuating civilians. That made the choice simple, at least for now. "Then let's get you out of here," he said firmly. "How far to your base?" 3 kilometers northwest, Wedge replied, "but it's crawling with stormtroopers and AT-AT walkers. Even if we reach it, we'd need a ship, and most of ours were destroyed on the ground." AT-AT walkers. Four-legged assault vehicles. Armor thick enough to shrug off starfighter blasters. They're tearing through our defenses like they're not even there. Aquaman smiled grimly. Let me worry about the walkers. You just get me to that base. As they moved through the ice tunnels toward the sounds of distant battle, Aquaman reached out with his telepathy, searching for any trace of his teammates. Diana's mind had always resonated differently, ancient, powerful, touched by divinity. If she was anywhere on this frozen planet, he'd find her. They'd fought beside each other long enough that their bond transcended mere communication. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he felt a flicker, distant, obscured, but definitely there. Diana was alive. Which meant the others likely were too. The Justice League had faced hostile worlds before. They'd survived invasions, dimensional rifts, and apocalyptic scenarios. This galaxy and its empire would learn what Earth's heroes already knew: when the League came together, nothing in the universe could stand against them for long. They just had to survive long enough to reunite. The rebel medical frigate shuddered again as another volley of turbolaser fire glanced off its failing shields. Wonder Woman stood on the bridge, hands gripping a support railing as she watched the tactical display with growing alarm. 3 escort ships had already been destroyed, their debris field spreading like funeral pyres across the void. The Imperial Star Destroyer was methodically eliminating the convoy piece by piece, and the rebels' return fire barely scratched its armored hull. "We can't take another hit like that," the bridge commander shouted over the chaos. "Shields are down to 18%. Engineering says we've got maybe 2 more volleys before we're flying naked." Luke Skywalker stood beside Wonder Woman, his face pale but determined. "We need to buy time for the transports to reach the rendezvous point. If the Redemption can draw Imperial fire for another 3 minutes. This ship will be destroyed," Wonder Woman interrupted, her voice cutting through the panic with Amazonian authority. "And all the lives aboard it lost. That is unacceptable." She turned to face Luke directly. "Your lightsaber, it can cut through starship hulls." Luke blinked at the sudden question. "In theory, yes, but why? And your force allows you to survive in vacuum temporarily?" "For maybe 30 seconds with meditation, but I don't see." Wonder Woman was already moving toward the airlock, her strides purposeful and unstoppable. Luke scrambled after her, suddenly understanding what she was proposing. "Wait, you can't be serious. You're talking about going outside the ship during combat. That's suicide." "For you, perhaps," Diana replied without breaking stride. "For an Amazon blessed by the gods, it is merely dangerous." She stopped at the airlock controls, turning to face the young Jedi with eyes that held centuries of warrior wisdom despite her youthful appearance. "I have fought in the void between worlds before, Luke Skywalker. Your force is not the only power that transcends mortal limitations. Even if you can survive out there," Luke argued desperately, "what can you possibly do against a Star Destroyer? It's a 1.5 kilometers of armored warship with enough firepower to level a continent." Diana smiled, and it was the smile of someone who had stood against gods and lived to tell the tale. "I am going to remind them that size is not everything in combat. And I am going to buy your people the time they need to escape." She paused, then added more gently, "Have faith, young one. I have faced worse odds." Before Luke could protest further, Wonder Woman cycled the airlock. The outer door opened to the absolute zero of space, and she stepped through without hesitation. The last thing Luke saw before the door sealed was her lasso glowing with golden radiance, pulsing like a second sun against the darkness. Outside the ship, Diana took a moment to orient herself in the 3-dimensional battlefield. The vacuum was familiar, she'd fought in space before, though never in a galaxy so far from home. Her divine heritage allowed her to survive for approximately 15 minutes without air, more than enough time for what she planned. The cold didn't touch her, the radiation washed over her harmlessly, and the silence was almost peaceful compared to the chaos inside the ship. The Star Destroyer loomed ahead, its gray hull bristling with weapons that tracked the fleeing rebel vessels with mechanical precision. Turbolaser batteries swiveled and fired in coordinated volleys, and in the distance, Diana could see smaller craft, TIE fighters, she remembered Luke calling them, swarming in aggressive attack patterns. She launched herself forward with godly strength, using the medical frigate's hull as a jumping point. Without atmosphere to slow her, Diana accelerated to incredible velocity, her trajectory aimed directly at the Star Destroyer's command tower. The lasso of truth uncoiled from her belt, its length extending impossibly far, glowing brighter as her determination crystallized into focused will. On the Executor's bridge, an ensign stared at his tactical display in confusion. "Sir, we're detecting an unidentified object accelerating from the rebel medical frigate. No propulsion signature, no engine emissions, but velocity is, that can't be right. It's moving at 0.45 sublight without any visible means of acceleration." The Star Destroyer's captain moved to examine the display, frowning. "Magnify visual." The main viewport shifted to show Wonder Woman's approach, and for a moment, everyone on the bridge simply stared. A woman. A single woman, flying through the void of space with nothing but determination and a glowing rope, heading straight toward a warship that outmassed her by billions of tons. "Is this some kind of rebel trick?" the captain demanded. "A new weapon?" "Unknown, sir," the sensor officer replied, his voice uncertain. She's organic. Human or near-human physiology. But the energy readings surrounding her are unlike anything in our database. It's not the Force, but it's similar. Ancient. Powerful. Then shoot her down, the captain snapped. All point defense batteries, target that, whatever she is. Eliminate the threat. Laser cannons swiveled to track Wonder Woman's approach, and space lit up with emerald fire. Diana twisted and rolled through the barrage with warrior's grace honed over centuries of combat, her bracers flashing as she deflected bolts that came too close. Each impact sent shock waves through her arms, but the divine metal held firm, just as it had deflected bullets and energy weapons on Earth. She closed the final distance to the Star Destroyer's hull and landed with enough force to dent the armored plating. Her fingers found purchase in the metal, and she began moving along the hull toward the nearest weapon's battery with impossible speed. When she reached it, the lasso of truth lashed out and wrapped around the cannon's barrel, glowing brilliant gold. "By Hera's truth," Diana whispered, channeling the lasso's power, "I compel you, cease your fire." The magic-forged rope had been created to compel honesty, to bind even gods to the truth of their nature. But truth was a flexible concept when applied to machinery and artificial intelligence. What was the truth of a weapon designed only to destroy? Diana poured her will into the lasso, not commanding obedience, but awakening purpose, forcing the turbolaser's targeting computer to acknowledge the truth that it was firing on unarmed medical vessels and civilian transports. The weapon's battery sparked and died, its systems overwhelmed by contradictory imperatives. Diana moved to the next, then the next, her lasso disabling weapons emplacements with methodical efficiency. It wouldn't stop the entire Star Destroyer, the ship had hundreds of cannons, but every battery she disabled was one fewer threat to the evacuation convoy. "What is she doing?" the Star Destroyer's captain shouted, watching tactical displays as weapon systems went offline in sequence. "How is one organic disabling military-grade armaments with nothing but physical contact?" "Unknown, sir. Whatever she's doing, it's spreading. The disabled systems are cascading through connected networks. If she reaches the primary power coupling, launch all TIE fighters. I want her removed from my hull immediately. And someone contact Lord Vader. Tell him we've found another one of these anomalies." 20 TIE fighters screamed toward Wonder Woman's position, their twin ion engines shrieking silently in the void. Diana released the lasso and turned to face them, planting her feet on the Star Destroyer's hull. As the fighters opened fire, she raised her bracers and began deflecting, each impact creating brilliant flashes of light. The TIE pilots, trained to fight starfighters and capital ships, Had no tactical framework for engaging a single humanoid target that moved like liquid lightning and turned their weapons aside with wrist-mounted shields. One fighter made the mistake of flying too close. Diana leaped, caught its wing, and with a burst of Amazonian strength, tore the solar panel completely off. The TIE spiraled out of control, its remaining engine sending it tumbling into the void. Its pilot ejected, and Diana made a mental note of his position. She wouldn't let anyone die if she could help it, even her enemies. The remaining TIE fighters broke formation, clearly receiving new orders. They ceased firing on Diana and instead refocused on the rebel convoy, which had used the distraction to put precious distance between themselves and the Star Destroyer. Wonder Woman had accomplished her goal, the medical transports were escaping. Now she just needed to survive long enough to rejoin them. 3 decks below the Star Destroyer's command bridge, in the detention block reserved for high-value prisoners, Cyborg's optical sensors flickered online. His last clear memory was of the boom tube collapsing around the Justice League, reality fragmenting into impossible geometries, and then nothing but corrupted data and system failures. Now he found himself in what appeared to be a high-tech prison cell, his cybernetic components restrained by some kind of energy field that pressed against his mechanical half like a physical weight. System diagnostic, he muttered, running internal checks. The results weren't encouraging. 37% of his systems were offline or operating at reduced capacity. The mother box that powered most of his advanced functions was in some kind of hibernation state, overwhelmed by the dimensional crossing. His connection to Earth's digital infrastructure was obviously severed. And worst of all, his boom tube generation capabilities were completely non-functional. The technology that might get the Justice League home was broken. "Great," Cyborg said to the empty cell. Lost in space, powers mostly offline, and locked up by who knows what military dictatorship. Just another Tuesday. The cell door hissed open, and 4 stormtroopers entered with weapons raised, flanking a human officer in a crisp gray uniform. The officer studied Cyborg with clinical interest, datapad in hand. "Specimen exhibits extensive cybernetic augmentation," he noted aloud, recording observations. "Degree of integration exceeds even the most advanced Imperial prosthetics. Technology appears organic in nature, self-healing components, adaptive systems. Remarkable." "I'm not a specimen," Cyborg replied coldly. "I'm a person. And I'm guessing you're the ones who locked me up after I crashed on your ice planet?" The officer smiled without warmth. "You were recovered from the Hoth system along with several other anomalies. Lord Vader has taken personal interest in your arrival. He believes you and your companions represent a significant strategic asset. Or threat. The distinction is irrelevant from my perspective. My orders are simply to study you and determine how your technology functions." Cyborg's remaining human eye narrowed. "You're not taking apart my tech. It's not just machinery, it's part of me. Literally." "Yes, the integration is fascinating," the officer continued, apparently not hearing the warning in Cyborg's voice. "The way organic tissue and mechanical components interface seamlessly suggests technology centuries beyond our current capabilities. The Emperor will be most interested in." Cyborg's right arm reconfigured with mechanical precision, panels sliding aside to reveal a sonic cannon that had somehow escaped the Empire's initial weapons scan. He'd kept it powered down during their inspection, just dormant circuitry and inert components. Now it hummed to life, and the stormtroopers barely had time to react before the sonic blast hit them. The pulse weapon wasn't designed to kill. Victor Stone had always been careful about that, but it was more than sufficient to knock out humanoid targets through armor. The 4 stormtroopers collapsed, unconscious before they hit the floor. The officer stumbled backward, reaching for an alarm, and Cyborg's arm extended on telescoping joints to grab him. "Here's what's going to happen," Cyborg said, pulling the terrified officer close. "You're going to tell me everything about where I am, what year it is, and what kind of government locks people up without trial. Then you're going to help me find my friends. And if you cooperate, I'll make sure you walk out of this alive. We clear?" The officer nodded frantically, and Cyborg set him down. Good. Start talking. And don't leave anything out. 5 minutes later, Cyborg had a basic understanding of the galaxy he'd landed in, and the picture wasn't pretty. Totalitarian empire. Extinct Jedi Order. Rebellion fighting against impossible odds. And according to the officer's nervous explanations, 6 other anomalies scattered across the Hoth system, all being actively hunted by Imperial forces. The Justice League was here. Separated, vulnerable, and walking into a war they didn't understand. Cyborg's mechanical hand clenched into a fist. Time to change that. He interfaced with the detention block security systems, his cybernetic components finally finding purchase in this galaxy's digital architecture. The technology was primitive compared to Earth's networks, but it was functional, and more importantly, it was everywhere. Ships, droids, communication networks, all interconnected in ways the Empire probably didn't fully appreciate. If Cyborg could hack into the Imperial network, he could find the others. And maybe, just maybe, he could figure out how to get them all home. First, though, he needed to get off this Star Destroyer without being vaporized. Which meant he needed an ally. Or at least someone desperate enough to help him in exchange for the kind of technological miracles only Victor Stone could provide. Time to find the rebellion. Green Lantern Hal Jordan floated in the darkness of space, his ring's emerald glow the only source of light in the shadow of Hoth's smaller moon. The construct he'd created, a transparent sphere providing atmosphere and protection, flickered intermittently, and that worried him more than he wanted to admit. His connection to OA, to the central power battery that fueled all Green Lantern rings, was gone. Completely severed. The ring still worked, drawing on the residual charge in its internal battery, but without the ability to recharge, he was operating on borrowed time. Current charge, 63%. Every construct he created, every feat of willpower he manifested, drained that percentage lower. And when it hit 0, Hal Jordan would be nothing more than a test pilot floating in alien space without a spacesuit. Ring, he said aloud, needing to hear a familiar voice even if it was just the ring's AI. Status report on dimensional breach. Any luck establishing contact with OA? The ring pulsed on his finger. Negative. Guardian connection severed. Current universe exhibits fundamental physical constants incompatible with transdimensional power battery access. Warning, current charge at 63%. Recommend minimal construct usage to extend operational window. Yeah, I got that part, Hal muttered. He'd been drifting for the better part of an hour, using minimal thrust constructs to survey the battlefield unfolding around Hoth. He'd watched the Imperial blockade form, seen the rebel ships desperately fleeing, and witnessed something that still made his test pilot brain struggle to process: a woman, flying through space without any visible protection, single-handedly assaulting a Star Destroyer. Diana. Had to be. Nobody else fought with that kind of fearless, almost reckless courage. Which meant at least one other League member was active in the area. The question was whether to reveal himself. Hal had stayed hidden deliberately, conserving ring power and assessing the tactical situation before committing to action. Old Air Force instincts, never engage until you understand the battle space. But watching Diana fight alone while he hid in the shadows didn't sit right. It went against everything the Green Lantern Corps stood for. Ring, calculate power expenditure for the following scenario: full-speed flight to that Star Destroyer, defensive construct sufficient to survive enemy fire, and enough offensive capability to disable their weapons targeting the woman on their hull. Calculating, estimated expenditure, 32% of remaining charge. Post-action reserve, 31%. Insufficient for extended combat operations. Hal grimaced. 31% reserve meant maybe one more major engagement after this, then he'd be flying on fumes. But leaving Diana to fight alone wasn't an option. Do it. Full burn. Let's show these Imperial guys what a Green Lantern can do. The ring flared brilliant emerald, and Hal Jordan streaked across space like a comet. He'd crossed half the distance to the Star Destroyer before their sensors registered him, and by then it was too late to establish effective targeting solutions. TIE fighters scrambled to intercept, but Hal had been dogfighting since before most of these pilots were born. He juked, rolled, and spiraled through their formation with fighter pilot instincts that transcended technology or training. His ring manifested a massive construct, 100-meter-wide fist, glowing with concentrated willpower, and he slammed it into the nearest weapons battery Diana hadn't reached yet. The turbolaser crumpled like aluminum foil, sparks erupting from its housing. Two more constructs formed simultaneously. A shield that deflected incoming TIE fighter fire, and a battering ram that punched through another cannon emplacement. Wonder Woman looked up from her own work, surprise and relief flickering across her face. She recognized the green light immediately, just as Hal had recognized her fighting style. Without words, without even telepathy, the two heroes synchronized their assault with the practiced ease of warriors who'd fought beside each other countless times. Diana's lasso wrapped around a sensor array, yanking it free from its moorings. Hal's ring constructs tore through shielding and armor plating, exposing vulnerable components. Together, they disabled 6 more weapon systems in under 90 seconds, moving with lethal efficiency across the Star Destroyer's hull like a 2-person demolition team. "Nice timing," Diana called out, her voice somehow carrying across the void through the lasso's divine properties. "Though I had the situation under control." "Never doubted it," Hal replied through a ring-generated communication beam. "Just thought you could use some company. Any idea where the others are?" "Scattered across the planet." "I've been trying to." Diana's warning came a split second too late. A massive shape emerged from the Star Destroyer's hangar bay, a shuttle flanked by 6 TIE fighters, all converging on their position with clear hostile intent. But it was the presence aboard that shuttle that made both heroes tense. Something cold, powerful, and utterly merciless that pressed against their senses like a physical weight. The shuttle's boarding ramp extended while still in flight, and Darth Vader stepped out into the void, his black cape billowing despite the absence of atmosphere. He stood on empty space as if it were solid ground, the force sustaining him in an environment that would kill any normal human in seconds. "Impressive," Vader's voice boomed across multiple frequencies, ensuring both heroes could hear. "Two anomalies working in concert. Your coordination suggests prior combat experience together. Tell me, are you warriors? Soldiers? Or something else entirely?" Hal created a protective bubble around himself and Diana, allowing them to speak without broadcasting to the entire Imperial fleet. "That's the guy who was fighting Clark," he whispered urgently. "The one with the laser sword. He's dangerous, Diana. Really dangerous. I can feel something coming off him that's making my ring actually nervous." "The Force," Diana replied, her warrior's instincts cataloging Vader as a threat on par with Ares or Cersei. Luke Skywalker spoke of it. "A mystical energy that permeates this galaxy. This Vader has mastered its darker aspects." She raised her voice to address the Sith Lord directly. "We are the Justice League. Champions of our world, defenders of those who cannot defend themselves. We did not come to your galaxy to make war, but we will not stand idle while you slaughter refugees." Vader's mechanical breathing was the only sound for several heartbeats. Then, justice. An interesting concept. "Tell me, champions, do you claim to understand justice in a galaxy you arrived in mere hours ago? Do you presume to judge conflicts you know nothing about?" He gestured, and the TIE fighters moved into attack formation. "The rebellion you defend are terrorists who murdered millions when they destroyed the Death Star. The Empire I serve brings order to a chaotic galaxy. Your interference is based on ignorance." Hal's ring hand clenched. Did he just say the rebellion are the terrorists? That's a new spin on fascism. He is not entirely wrong, Diana admitted quietly, though it pained her. We do not know this galaxy's history. But I know tyranny when I see it, and those ships, she gestured toward the fleeing rebel convoy, are running for their lives from overwhelming military force. That is not the action of aggressors. Spoken like a true warrior, Vader said, his tone almost approving. You trust your instincts over political complexity. Admirable, if short-sighted. His hand rose, and both heroes felt the invisible pressure of the Force gathering around them. Now you will submit to Imperial custody, or I will demonstrate why the Sith rule this galaxy. Ring, how sub-vocalized, power assessment for fighting this guy. Insufficient data. Subject exhibits capabilities consistent with psychokinetic manipulation of fundamental forces. Threat assessment, extreme. Recommend retreat N. Yeah, that's not happening. Hal's ring blazed brighter, manifesting a construct of a full-sized fighter jet around his body, not for flight, but for the psychological edge it gave him. Old habits from his Air Force days. Listen up, Vader. I don't care how scary you think you are, or what kind of magic tricks you've got. Where I come from, I'm an intergalactic cop. And cops don't run from bullies, no matter how big their ships are. Wonder Woman drew her sword, the guards had finally returned it when she'd proven herself to the rebels, and settled into a combat stance that had been perfected over 3,000 years of warfare. We have faced gods and monsters, Sith Lord. You will find us more difficult to subdue than you anticipate. Vader's respirator hissed what might have been a laugh. Overconfidence. The Jedi shared that flaw. It destroyed them all. His lightsaber ignited with a snap hiss, and the TIE fighters opened fire simultaneously. The battle that erupted would be recorded in Imperial combat logs as Incident Hoth 7, and classified at the highest security levels. A Green Lantern and an Amazon warrior, fighting in perfect synchronization against a Sith Lord and an entire fighter squadron. Hal's constructs, shields, weapons, even a giant baseball bat at one point, deflected and countered with creative brilliance. Diana's combat prowess, honed across centuries, turned her into a whirlwind of precise violence. And Vader, the Dark Lord of the Sith, matched them both with cold efficiency and telekinetic power that bent the battlefield to his will. But the fight was taking its toll. Hal's ring charge dropped steadily, 48%, 41%, 37%. Each construct he manifested burned precious energy he couldn't replace. Diana's divine stamina was not infinite in the void, her 15-minute limit was approaching rapidly. And Vader, for all his power, was outnumbered and fighting opponents whose abilities he couldn't fully predict. The stalemate broke when a new voice crackled across all communication frequencies, cutting through the chaos with desperate urgency. This is Rebel Transport Designation Bright Hope. We're taking heavy damage. Hull breaches on multiple decks. We need immediate assistance or we're going to. The transmission cut off as turbolaser fire from a second Star Destroyer, one that had remained on the convoy's flank, tore through the transport's shields and punched massive holes in its hull. The ship listed, atmosphere venting in crystalline plumes, and smaller life pods began ejecting in all directions. Diana's head snapped toward the dying transport, her warrior's focus momentarily broken by the sight of civilians in mortal danger. Hal felt the same pull, the fundamental heroic instinct that had made them put on costumes and risk their lives in the first place. People were dying. Everything else became secondary. Ring, plot intercept course to those life pods. Maximum speed. Warning, insufficient power for combat operations after rescue attempt. Charge will drop below 20%. Just do it. Hal's constructs dissolved as he redirected all available power into pure speed, streaking away from Vader toward the transport. Diana was right behind him, using the last of her void survivable time to reach the nearest cluster of escaping pods. They couldn't save the ship itself, it was already breaking apart, secondary explosions rippling through its superstructure, but they could save the people inside those fragile escape vehicles. Vader watched them go, making no move to pursue. His respirator hissed rhythmically as he processed what he'd just witnessed. The anomalies had broken off their attack not because they were losing, but because civilians were in danger. They had abandoned tactical advantage and their own safety to attempt a rescue that would likely cost them dearly. The Jedi would have done the same. It was their greatest strength, and their fatal weakness. Lord Vader, his shuttle pilot reported, "Shall we pursue?" Negative. Let them save their refugees. It will teach us more about their capabilities than continued combat. Vader's gaze tracked the two heroes as they created an impossible rescue operation, one with a glowing green energy field, gathering life pods like flowers, the other physically grabbing pods and hurling them toward the safety of the rebel convoy with superhuman strength. The Emperor had commanded him to capture these anomalies. But perhaps there was a better way. Let them integrate with the rebellion. Let them believe they were helping. And when the trap was finally sprung, they would have nowhere to run, no allies to turn to, and no choice but to serve the Empire or watch this galaxy burn around them. Vader returned to his shuttle, already formulating his report. The hunt had only just begun. Batman crouched in the ventilation shaft overlooking the Rebel Command Center, his cowl's advanced optics recording everything. The Rodian smuggler had been surprisingly helpful once properly motivated, a combination of credits from Batman's utility belt, which apparently held universal value across galaxies, and the implicit threat of being left to Imperial mercy. Now Bruce Wayne was exactly where he needed to be, invisible, observing, and gathering intelligence. The command center buzzed with controlled chaos. Holographic displays showed the Hoth evacuation in real time, each transport status tracked with military precision. Rebel officers shouted coordinates and tactical updates while Mon Mothma, a woman whose bearing suggested both authority and exhaustion, coordinated the operation from a central platform. But what caught Batman's attention was the conversation happening in the corner, away from the main command staff. Two figures stood in heated discussion, Luke Skywalker, the young Jedi he'd heard mentioned in intercepted transmissions, and a woman in a white senatorial gown whose tactical analysis was sharp enough to impress even Bruce. Princess Leia Organa, his cowl's limited translation matrix identified, cross-referencing stolen Imperial databases. "Can't just trust them," Leia was saying, her voice tense but controlled. 7 unknown entities with powers we can't explain or predict. For all we know, they're Imperial agents sent to infiltrate the Alliance. They saved rebel lives, Luke countered. The woman on the medical frigate, Diana, she went into space during combat to buy us time. The one with the green energy constructs pulled 37 people from escape pods while under active TIE fighter assault. Those aren't the actions of infiltrators. They're the actions of people establishing credibility, Leia shot back. I'm not saying they're definitely enemies, Luke. I'm saying we don't know what they are, and blind trust gets people killed. Your father trusted the wrong person, and look what happened to the Jedi Order. Luke flinched at the mention of his father, and Batman filed that reaction away for later analysis. Complicated family history, clearly. Useful leverage if needed, though he preferred not to weaponize personal trauma unless absolutely necessary. We need allies, Luke said quietly. You've seen the reports. The Empire is consolidating power systems throughout the Outer Rim. Our fleet is scattered. We've lost 2 major bases in 3 months. If these strangers can help, then they should prove it by telling us where they came from and what they want, Leia interrupted. Not by making grand gestures and expecting us to fall in line out of gratitude. Batman had heard enough. He agreed with Princess Leia's caution, it was exactly how he would approach unknown variables. But her suspicion also meant the Justice League needed to establish trust quickly, before the rebellion decided they were more trouble than they were worth and handed them over to the Empire as a peace offering. He dropped from the ventilation shaft with barely a whisper of displaced air, landing in the shadows behind a bank of communication equipment. His cape spread automatically, making him appear larger and more imposing, psychological warfare basics. When he stepped into the light, both Luke and Leia spun toward him, hands instinctively moving toward weapons. I can answer your questions, Princess, Batman said in a voice calculated to convey authority without aggression. But first, you'll answer mine. Who is Darth Vader, and why does he radiate the kind of darkness I usually associate with demonic possession? Luke's lightsaber was halfway ignited before Leia's hand stopped him. She studied Batman with sharp intelligence, taking in the armor, the cape, the utility belt, and the complete lack of visible weapons. You're one of them. The anomalies from Hoth. I'm Batman. And yes, my team and I were pulled into your galaxy through a dimensional rift we didn't create and don't yet understand. Bruce moved closer, hands visible and non-threatening. We're not Imperial agents, we're not Sith infiltrators, and we're not here to conquer anything. We're lost, separated from our world, and trying to understand what happened so we can get home. Dimensional rift, Leia repeated skeptically. That's convenient. It's the truth, Batman replied flatly. Which I can prove if you give me access to your astrophysics data and 15 minutes with your navigation computers. I've been monitoring your transmissions for the past hour. 7 distinct energy signatures appeared simultaneously across Hoth, none matching any known Imperial or Rebel technology. Those signatures are my teammates. Luke's expression shifted from defensive to curious. You've been monitoring us? How did you even access our encrypted channels? Your encryption is decent but not unbreakable, Batman said with the faintest hint of professional critique. The underlying architecture relies on rotating cipher keys every 73 seconds. Predictable pattern, exploitable if you know what you're looking for. He paused. I'm not your enemy, but I am a detective. Gathering information is what I do. Leia and Luke exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. Finally, Leia spoke. If you want our trust, start by explaining your companions. The woman who can survive in space, Diana. The man with the green energy constructs. The others we've detected but haven't identified yet. What are they, and what can they do? Batman considered how much to reveal, then decided that honesty, carefully calibrated honesty, was the best strategy. Diana is an Amazon princess, blessed by ancient gods with strength, speed, and near invulnerability. The man with green energy is Hal Jordan, a member of an intergalactic peacekeeping force that uses willpower to create solid constructs. There's also Kal-El, an alien from a dead planet whose physiology is empowered by solar radiation. Arthur Curry, an Atlantean with superhuman strength and the ability to communicate with marine life. Victor Stone, a cyborg with advanced technological capabilities. And Barry Allen, who can move faster than human eyes can track. And you? Leia prompted. I'm human. No powers, no divine heritage, no alien biology. Just training, technology, and determination. Batman's voice carried quiet confidence. We call ourselves the Justice League. On our world, we protect people from threats they can't face alone. Tyrants, warlords, alien invasions, supernatural entities, we've fought them all. Luke's eyes widened. You're warriors. Heroes. We're people who chose to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them, Batman corrected. Which is why we need to understand your conflict before we choose sides. Princess Leia is right to be suspicious. We don't know your history, your politics, or what started this war. Darth Vader claimed the rebellion destroyed something called a Death Star and killed millions. Is that true? The question hung in the air like a blade. Leia's jaw tightened, but she didn't look away. Yes. The Death Star was an Imperial superweapon capable of destroying entire planets. It obliterated Alderaan, my homeworld, billions of people, as a demonstration of power. We destroyed it to prevent more atrocities. The crew aboard were complicit in genocide. Their deaths are on the Empire's hands, not ours. Batman processed that information with the cold analytical precision of a man who'd made impossible choices himself. The Empire destroyed an entire planet to prove a point. That's not law enforcement or maintaining order. That's terrorism on a scale that defies comprehension. Now you understand what we're fighting, Luke said quietly. The Empire isn't just authoritarian. It's actively evil. The Emperor is a Sith Lord, a dark side force user who manipulated galactic politics for decades to seize absolute power. He wiped out the Jedi Order, enslaved entire species, and built weapons designed to rule through fear. We're not terrorists, Batman. We're freedom fighters trying to restore democracy. And Vader? Batman pressed. Who is he really? Luke's expression clouded with pain and anger. He was a Jedi once. Anakin Skywalker, one of the greatest warriors the Order ever produced. The Emperor corrupted him, turned him to the dark side, and now he's the Empire's enforcer. He hunts down Jedi survivors and crushes any system that resists Imperial control. Luke trailed off, unable to finish. He's a monster, Leia finished coldly. He tortured me for information about the rebellion. Stood by while Alderaan was destroyed. He's responsible for countless deaths across the galaxy, and he does it all without remorse or hesitation. Batman's eyes narrowed behind the cowl. A fallen hero turned enforcer for a fascist regime. He'd seen that pattern before: Harvey Dent, Jason Todd in his darkest moments, even Justice Lords from alternate realities who decided authoritarianism was justified if it prevented chaos. But those cases involved complex circumstances, psychological breaks, and often genuine belief they were doing the right thing. Vader sounded different. Deliberate choice. Sustained evil. No redemption arc visible. I've fought people like your Emperor before, Batman said finally. Dictators who think fear equals respect, who build weapons instead of trust, who destroy rather than create. They always fall eventually. The question is how many people die before it happens. He turned to face both rebel leaders directly. The Justice League will help you. Not because we fully understand your politics, but because we've seen enough to know the Empire represents everything we stand against. Just like that? Leia asked, suspicion still evident. We tell you our story and you immediately commit to a galactic war. I commit to protecting people from tyrants, Batman clarified. Whether that means fighting in your war or finding a third option remains to be seen. But we won't stand idle while an authoritarian regime murders civilians. That's non-negotiable. Mon Mothma approached their group, her elegant features lined with concern. I apologize for interrupting, but we have a situation. The anomaly we detected crash landing in the northern ice fields, the one with the extraordinary thermal signature, has just disabled 3 AT-AT walkers single-handedly. Our ground forces report he's heading toward the main Imperial column with what appears to be combat intent. Batman's stomach sank. Thermal signature. Solar-powered physiology. That's Kal-El, Superman. He looked at the tactical display showing the battle unfolding. Clark was flying straight into a mechanized Imperial division, alone, without intel or tactical support. I need transport to that location immediately. If Superman engages the Empire at full capacity without understanding the political situation, this becomes an international incident we might not recover from. He's your companion? Mon Mothma asked. He's the most powerful member of our team, Batman replied grimly. And he has a tendency to solve problems with overwhelming force when people are in danger. If he thinks the rebels need rescuing, then he might accidentally start a war, Leia finished, already moving toward the command console. Wedge, prepare your X-Wing for immediate launch. You're taking our new friend to the northern sector. And Wedge? She looked back at Batman with hard eyes. If your Superman causes a diplomatic catastrophe, the Alliance will disavow all knowledge of your presence here. Clear. Crystal, Batman replied, already running tactical scenarios in his mind. He needed to reach Clark before the situation escalated beyond control. And he needed to reunite the Justice League before they stumbled into conflicts they didn't understand. The galaxy had just gotten far more complicated. Superman hovered 20 meters above the frozen battlefield, cape billowing in the wind generated by AT-AT walker movements, and watched Imperial forces methodically slaughter retreating rebels. The massive four-legged war machines advanced with mechanical precision. their heavy laser cannons carving through defensive positions like they were made of paper. Rebel troopers fell by the dozens, their portable weapons utterly ineffective against armor plating designed to withstand starfighter assault. Clark's jaw tightened. He'd seen enough. The first AT-AT never knew what hit it. Superman accelerated from a hover to supersonic speed in less than a second, slamming into the walker's forward left leg with the force of a meteorite impact. The Durasteel support strut, designed to carry 80 metric tons of armored assault vehicle, crumpled like aluminum foil. The AT-AT tilted, its computer systems screaming warnings as structural integrity failed, and toppled sideways with ponderous inevitability. It hit the ice with enough force to register on seismic sensors 3 kilometers away. The remaining walkers pivoted with surprising speed, their commanders recognizing a threat even if they couldn't quite process what they were seeing. Laser fire converged on Superman's position, emerald bolts that would vaporize infantry or destroy light vehicles. Clark stood his ground and let them hit. The impacts washed over his Kryptonian physiology harmlessly, though he could feel the energy drain slightly. His solar reserve still hadn't fully adapted to this galaxy's stellar spectrum. "Attention Imperial forces," Superman broadcast, his voice amplified to carry across the battlefield. "I'm giving you one chance to withdraw. Stop firing on retreating soldiers. Power down your weapons and leave this area peacefully." The response was predictable. More laser fire, heavier concentrations, and 2 AT-ATs adjusting their stance to bring all weapons to bear on the flying anomaly. Superman sighed. He'd tried the peaceful approach. Now he'd do what needed to be done. He flew directly at the nearest walker's head section, the command module where pilots and gunners operated in climate-controlled comfort. His fist impacted the reinforced viewport at precisely calculated force, enough to shatter the transparisteel and create explosive decompression, not enough to kill the crew inside. The pilots would have seconds to seal their suits before the sub-zero atmosphere flooded in. Harsh, but survivable. The walker staggered, its command systems offline. Superman moved to the next one, heat vision lancing out to slice through the connecting joints between body and legs. Precision cuts, targeted destruction. The AT-AT collapsed but remained largely intact, preserving the crew inside. Disabled, not destroyed. Cease fire. Clark shouted again, hoping someone in command would see reason. You can't hurt me, and I can tear through every walker in your column without breaking a sweat. Withdraw now. Instead of withdrawing, the Imperial commander made a catastrophic decision. Unable to damage the flying anomaly with conventional weapons, he ordered artillery support from orbiting Star Destroyers. Turbolaser fire began raining from the sky, not the precision anti-vehicle strikes of the AT-ATs, but sustained bombardment designed to level entire city blocks. Superman's enhanced hearing caught the screams before the first bolt hit. Rebel soldiers scrambling for cover. Wounded personnel who couldn't move fast enough. And in a makeshift triage station 300 meters away, dozens of injured fighters and medical staff who would be vaporized in the next volley. He moved without thinking, positioning himself between the triage station and the incoming fire. The turbolaser bolt hit Superman square in the chest with enough energy to crack continents. He absorbed the impact, felt it burn through his partially depleted reserves, and held position. Another bolt. Then another. Each one drained him further, pushed him closer to the edge of his current capabilities, but he didn't move. Because behind him, people were alive who would otherwise be dead. The Star Destroyer adjusted its targeting, recognizing that the flying anomaly was protecting a specific location. The next bombardment spread wider, forcing Superman to make an impossible choice: protect the triage station, or protect the scattered rebel infantry taking cover in ice trenches 200 meters east. No, Clark growled through gritted teeth. He wasn't going to let anyone die. Not today. Not ever. His heat vision lashed out with surgical precision, intercepting turbolaser bolts mid-flight and detonating them prematurely. His super speed, still diminished but functional, let him position himself between multiple impact points simultaneously. And his frost breath created ice walls that deflected glancing strikes away from populated areas. To the rebel soldiers watching from their defensive positions, it looked like a miracle. A man in a blue suit and red cape, catching orbital bombardment with his body while simultaneously protecting dozens of scattered positions. Moving faster than their eyes could fully track, absorbing firepower that should reduce any organic being to constituent atoms, and doing it all without apparent effort. To Superman, it felt like drowning. Each turbolaser strike drained power he couldn't replenish quickly enough. His Kryptonian cells were processing this galaxy's solar radiation more efficiently now. Adaptation was occurring, but not fast enough to sustain this level of output indefinitely. He was burning through reserves at an unsustainable rate. And then, cutting through the chaos like a knife, Batman's voice crackled through the Justice League comlink Superman had assumed was non-functional. "Clark, stop. Right now." Superman's head snapped toward the source. An X-Wing fighter screamed overhead, banking hard to avoid turbolaser fire, and perched on its wing, impossibly, absurdly, was Batman, cape billowing in the slipstream. The rebel pilot was clearly having a nervous breakdown. But Bruce looked perfectly composed, like riding the exterior of a starfighter through active combat was just another Tuesday. "Bruce?" Clark's voice carried relief and confusion. "How are you?" Explanations later. "Listen to me very carefully." Batman's tone was the one he used when seconds mattered. "You're defending Rebel Alliance forces against the Galactic Empire. This galaxy is in the middle of a civil war. The Empire is fascist and tyrannical, we're on the right side morally. But if you continue this engagement at full capacity, you'll trigger an escalation we can't control. Pull back. Now." "There are wounded here," Superman protested, even as he continued intercepting orbital strikes. "If I leave, they die. If you stay, you become a weapon of mass destruction that both sides will try to capture or kill," Batman countered. "Vader is already en route to this location with reinforcements. Diana and Hal engaged him in orbit, he knows what you are, and he's bringing sufficient force to contain you. Trust me, Clark. We need a tactical withdrawal." Superman's eyes flicked toward the horizon, where his enhanced vision caught the telltale silhouettes of additional Imperial walkers approaching, supported by troop transports and what looked like mobile artillery platforms. Batman was right, this was about to become a sustained battle, and he couldn't protect everyone if the Empire committed to overwhelming force. "Fine," Clark said reluctantly. "But we're taking the wounded with us." "Obviously," Batman replied, like any other option was inconceivable. "Rebel forces, this is Batman, unknown to you, but working with your Princess Leia and Commander Skywalker. We're extracting wounded personnel. Prepare for immediate evacuation to fallback position Beta 7. The rebel commander on the ground, a grizzled veteran who'd seen too many battles, didn't question the order. Anyone crazy enough to ride a starfighter wing through orbital bombardment clearly had operational authority from someone important. "Copy that. All units, fighting retreat to Beta 7. Wounded personnel priority for transport." Superman dropped to the ice and began the careful, terrifying work of gathering injured soldiers with super speed. Each one he lifted as gently as possible, mindful that his strength could accidentally injure someone he was trying to save. He moved between triage positions, bundling wounded fighters and carrying them in groups of 4 and 5 toward the retreating rebel lines. The Imperial forces, recognizing their targets were escaping, intensified fire. AT-AT cannons tracked Superman's movements, turbolaser bombardment increased, and TIE fighters screamed down from orbit to strafe the evacuation route. Clark positioned himself as a mobile shield, absorbing hits that would otherwise massacre fleeing soldiers. Batman, meanwhile, had dropped from the X-Wing and was coordinating defensive positions with tactical precision that impressed even the veteran rebel commander. Portable shield generators here, and here. Concentrate anti-vehicle fire on the lead walker's neck joint, structural weak point. And someone tell your orbital support we need covering fire on Imperial approach vectors now. "Who the hell are you?" the commander demanded, even as he relayed Batman's instructions. "Someone who's fought similar battles on 100 different worlds," Batman replied. "And someone who knows your Princess Leia personally vouched for my presence here, so unless you want to explain to her why you ignored tactical advice that could save lives, I suggest you follow orders." The rebel commander grinned despite the chaos. "I like you. You've got the attitude of someone who's told generals to shut up before." "Frequently," Batman confirmed. The evacuation took 4 minutes, an eternity in combat time. But miraculously shorter than it should have been given the circumstances. Superman's last trip carried the triage station's head surgeon and her 2 assistants, all of whom looked simultaneously terrified and awestruck. When he set them down at the fallback position, the surgeon grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "Thank you," she said simply, tears freezing on her cheeks. "You saved 47 lives today. We won't forget." Superman managed a tired smile. "Just doing what anyone would do." "No," she corrected firmly. "What anyone should do. There's a difference." Before Clark could respond, Batman was pulling him toward an evacuation transport. "Move. Vader's landing party is 3 minutes out, and you're in no condition for round 2. Bruce's eyes scanned Superman with diagnostic precision. "You're operating at what, 60% capacity?" "Maybe less." "Somewhere around there," Clark admitted. "These suns aren't like our yellow sun. I'm adapting, but slowly. Then we retreat, regroup with the others, and figure out our next move as a team," Batman said firmly. "This galaxy has survived its war for decades. It can survive another day without us playing saviors." The transport lifted off just as the horizon filled with Imperial reinforcements. Superman watched through the viewport as Darth Vader's distinctive shuttle touched down on the battlefield they just evacuated, surrounded by companies of stormtroopers and AT-ST scout walkers. The Sith Lord stood in the frozen wasteland, black cape whipping in the wind, and slowly turned his masked head toward the fleeing rebel transport. Even across kilometers of distance, even through layers of durasteel and transparasteel, Clark felt the weight of that gaze. A presence that was vast, cold, and utterly certain of its power. Vader raised one gloved hand, not in attack or threat, but in acknowledgement. "I see you," that gesture said. "And next time, you will not escape so easily." Superman turned away from the viewport, settling into a crash seat next to Batman. "Bruce, what have we gotten ourselves into?" Batman's expression was grim behind the cowl. "A war between authoritarianism and freedom. A galaxy that doesn't understand what we are or what we're capable of. And a conflict where both sides will try to use us as weapons." He paused. "In other words, exactly the kind of situation the Justice League was created to handle." "Optimistic assessment." "Realistic assessment," Batman corrected. "We've faced worse odds. We just need to stay together, gather intelligence, and make strategic choices instead of reactive ones." His tone softened slightly. "That means no more solo heroics, Clark. Even from you." Superman nodded wearily. "Understood. So what's the plan?" "First, we reunite with Diana, Hal, and the others. Then we learn everything we can about this galaxy's factions, politics, and power structures. And then, Batman's eyes narrowed with detective's focus, we figure out how to end this war in a way that doesn't make us tyrants ourselves." "No pressure," Clark said with dark humor. "None at all," Batman replied. "Welcome to the Star Wars galaxy, Clark. Try not to punch any more planets while we're here." Despite everything, Superman laughed. Leave it to Bruce to make jokes while planning strategy in the middle of an alien civil war. Some things were constant across universes. The Rebel Command Frigate Home 1 hung in the void beyond Hoth's gravity well, its cavernous hangar bays receiving the last stragglers from the evacuation. Admiral Akbar, a Mon Calamari whose species' natural caution had been honed into strategic brilliance, stood on the bridge watching tactical displays with growing unease. 7 anomalies. 7 beings of impossible power who'd appeared from nowhere and immediately involved themselves in the rebellion's desperate flight from Hoth. And now, according to Princess Leia's latest transmission, all 7 were being brought aboard his flagship for a formal briefing. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, the transport carrying the anomalies has docked in Bay 7. Princess Leia requests your presence in the main conference room immediately. Akbar's face tentacles twitched with apprehension. Very well. Double security around that bay. And have medical teams standing by. We still don't fully understand these beings' physiology. Sir, should we also have security in the conference room? Against beings who survived vacuum exposure, disabled Star Destroyer weapons with their bare hands, and moved faster than our targeting computers could track. Akbar's voice carried dry humor. What exactly would you have our security teams do if they became hostile? The tactical officer had no good answer. The conference room was designed for fleet coordination, holographic displays, star charts, and enough seating for 50 senior officers. Currently, it held a far stranger assembly. The Justice League sat on one side of the long table, Superman still showing signs of exhaustion, Batman's cowl retracted to reveal Bruce Wayne's calculating gaze, Wonder Woman with her armor gleaming despite recent combat, Green Lantern's ring pulsing faintly at low charge, Aquaman looking distinctly uncomfortable this far from any substantial body of water, Flash vibrating slightly with nervous energy, and Cyborg interfacing directly with the table's computer systems. Across from them sat the Rebel Alliance leadership, Princess Leia Organa, her diplomatic composure masking deep suspicion. Luke Skywalker, openly curious and radiating force sensitivity that made several League members instinctively uneasy. Admiral Akbar, evaluating threats with military precision. Mon Mothma, whose serene exterior concealed razor-sharp political acumen. And General Carlos Rican, the Hoth base commander who'd coordinated the evacuation. Wedge Antilles stood by the door, technically security but mostly present because he'd personally encountered 2 of the anomalies and his testimony might prove valuable. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Batman spoke first. Before we begin, I want to thank you for not treating us as prisoners or hostages. Given the circumstances, that shows remarkable trust. Or remarkable desperation, Leia replied coolly. We're not naive, Batman. We brought you here because you saved rebel lives, but also because keeping you scattered across the galaxy seemed strategically unwise. This way, we can monitor you, communicate with you, and potentially work together, or contain you if necessary. Honest, Flash muttered. I can respect that. Princess Leia is correct to be cautious, Wonder Woman said, her voice carrying diplomatic weight earned over decades as Themyscir's ambassador. We are strangers in your galaxy, wielding powers you cannot explain or counter. In your position, I would also gather us in one location where they could be observed. She leaned forward, hands folded on the table. So let us dispense with suspicion and speak plainly. You want to know what we are, where we came from, and whether we're a threat. We want to understand your conflict, assess whether your cause is just, and determine how to return home. Those goals are not mutually exclusive. Mon Mothma's eyes glinted with appreciation. You speak like someone accustomed to diplomacy between nations. I am an ambassador as well as a warrior, Diana confirmed. On our world, I represent an entire culture to the international community. I understand the delicate balance of power and trust. Then let's begin with the basics, Admiral Akbar said, his voice gravelly and deliberate. Your companion, Batman, claims you come from another universe entirely. Not a distant region of our galaxy, but a fundamentally different reality. Is this accurate? Yes, Cyborg confirmed, gesturing to a holographic display he'd generated from the table's systems. I've analyzed your galaxy's physical constants, stellar composition, and what limited historical data I could access through your networks. Nothing matches Earth's universal signatures. The fundamental frequencies are different. Your galaxy operates on subtly different physics, particularly this force that several of you reference. Luke leaned forward, intrigued. You can measure the force. I can detect an energy field that permeates your galaxy and interacts with biological systems in ways that violate Earth's understanding of thermodynamics, Cyborg replied. Whether that's what you call the Force, I can't say definitively. But it's real, it's everywhere, and it's something that doesn't exist in our home universe. Which explains why you don't register as Force-sensitive, Luke mused. You're not connected to it because you didn't evolve in a universe where it exists. He looked at Superman with open fascination. But some of you have abilities that seem almost Force-like. Superman caught orbital bombardment with his body. Diana survived in vacuum. How is that possible without the Force? Different power sources, Superman explained, his voice still carrying exhaustion but also determination to be understood. I'm Kryptonian, my species evolved under a red sun, and when exposed to yellow sun radiation, our cells store and process that energy in ways that grant us abilities you'd consider superhuman. Flight, strength, invulnerability, enhanced senses. It's not magic or mysticism, it's advanced biology. And I am blessed by the Greek gods, Wonder Woman added. My strength, speed, and resilience come from divine sources, magic, if you will, though I recognize that word carries different meaning in different cultures. Magic, Leia repeated skeptically. Gods. Alien biology. You realize how that sounds? No more absurd than an energy field that lets people move objects with their minds and see the future, Batman countered. We've seen Luke demonstrate telekinesis. We know Darth Vader can survive in vacuum through Force-assisted life support. Your galaxy has its own impossibilities, they're just familiar to you. Flash raised his hand like a student in class. Can we address the elephant in the room? Because I'm pretty sure everyone's wondering, are we stuck here permanently, or is there a way home? All eyes turned to Cyborg, who'd been the Justice League's expert on dimensional travel since his mother box integration. Victor's expression was grim. Honestly? I don't know. The boom tube technology one used to open dimensional portals is damaged. The mother box is in some kind of hibernation state, overwhelmed by crossing into a universe with fundamentally different physical laws. It's trying to adapt, rewrite its own programming to function here, but that could take days or weeks. Maybe longer. And without the boom tubes? Superman prompted. We'd need to find another dimensional gateway, or build one from scratch using this galaxy's technology, Cyborg said. Which brings me to something I discovered while hacking Imperial databases. He pulled up schematics that made several rebel officers gasp in recognition. They call it hyperspace, a dimension parallel to normal space that allows faster-than-light travel. The physics are similar to boom tube dimensional folding, just applied differently. Akbar's face tentacles rippled with surprise. You're suggesting hyperspace travel and your boom tubes are related technologies? Related principles, Cyborg clarified. Both involve punching through normal spacetime to access alternate dimensional layers. Your hyperdrive technology is more refined for travel, less adaptable for general dimensional manipulation. But theoretically, if I could access a sufficiently powerful hyperdrive and modify it with the right dimensional mathematics, he trailed off, unwilling to promise something he wasn't certain he could deliver. You could open a portal home, Batman finished. How powerful a hyperdrive are we talking about? Cyborg's holographic display shifted to show a massive vessel. Capital ship scale. Something with the energy output of a Star Destroyer at minimum. Possibly something even larger, an Imperial Star Destroyer would be ideal, but those are rare and heavily guarded. So you need access to one of the Empire's most powerful warships, Leia said flatly. That's not encouraging. Or a rebel capital ship, Aquaman interjected. You have large vessels too, correct? This ship we're currently on, Home 1, it has powerful hyperdrive systems. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. General Riken spoke for the first time, his voice hard. You want to experiment with our flagship's hyperdrive. The vessel that coordinates our entire fleet, houses our command staff, and represents our only mobile base of operations. You want to risk destroying it in an experimental dimensional breach. I wouldn't destroy it, Cyborg protested. I'm a professional. I've done this kind of work hundreds of times. In your universe, Akbar countered. With your technology. Here, you're admittedly working with unfamiliar systems and physics you don't fully understand. The risk is substantial. Tension crackled across the table. The Justice League needed the rebellion's resources to get home. The rebellion needed to protect their limited assets and couldn't afford catastrophic failures. It was an impasse born of legitimate concerns on both sides. Batman broke the stalemate with characteristic directness. Then we table the discussion of returning home for now and focus on the immediate situation. The rebellion needs allies. We need to understand this galaxy better before we can navigate it safely. Propose a trial period, we work with you, help where we can, demonstrate our capabilities and intentions. In exchange, you provide intelligence, resources, and eventually access to the technology we need. If either side decides the arrangement isn't working, we part ways peacefully. You make it sound simple, Mon Mothma said, though her expression suggested she was seriously considering the proposal. It can be simple, Wonder Woman agreed. We are warriors and protectors by nature. Your rebellion fights against tyranny and oppression, that aligns with our values. Help us understand your war, and we will help you fight it. But we will not be weapons you point and fire. We make our own tactical decisions, and we answer to our own conscience. Unacceptable, General Riken said immediately. You can't operate independently within our military structure. That's a recipe for disaster. We're not asking to join your military structure, Batman clarified. We're offering to operate as allied independent agents. Similar to how you treat a neutral system that provided support without formal alliance membership. We coordinate with you, share intelligence, assist in operations where our unique capabilities provide advantage. But we retain autonomy over our actions. Luke spoke up, his voice thoughtful. That's, actually not unprecedented. The Alliance works with independent operatives all the time. Smugglers, mercenaries, sympathetic neutrals. As long as goals align and communication remains open, it can work. Those operatives don't have the power to accidentally obliterate star systems, Leia pointed out. She looked directly at Superman. What you did on Hoth, saving those soldiers, was heroic. But it also revealed capabilities that make you a strategic asset both sides will fight to control or eliminate. The Empire now knows you exist. Darth Vader personally engaged 3 of you. The Emperor will want you captured, studied, or killed. By helping us, you've made yourselves targets. We were targets the moment we arrived, Superman replied quietly. Vader tried to capture me within an hour of our arrival. Your Empire doesn't negotiate with unknown variables, they try to control them. At least the rebellion asked questions first. Flash leaned back in his chair, fingers drumming nervously on the table. Look, I'm just going to say what we're all thinking. This is a lot more complicated than our usual punch the bad guy, save the day routine. We're in a galaxy-wide civil war with politics, factions, and history we don't understand. We could accidentally make things worse by trying to help. You could, Akbar agreed bluntly. Good intentions don't guarantee good outcomes. The rebellion has learned that lesson repeatedly. Which is why we need to be smart about this, Batman said. Gather intelligence. Understand the battlefield. Make strategic interventions rather than tactical ones. We're not here to win your war for you, we're here to survive, find a way home, and hopefully do some good along the way. Mon Mothma studied each League member in turn, her expression thoughtful. Finally, she spoke with the careful deliberation of someone making a decision that could shape galactic history. Very well. The Alliance will extend provisional cooperation to the Justice League. You'll be granted access to our intelligence databases, provided with basic equipment and resources, and consulted on operations where your unique abilities might prove valuable. In exchange, you'll coordinate your actions with Alliance Command, share any intelligence you gather, and refrain from unilateral operations that could compromise our security. And the hyperdrive research? Cyborg asked carefully. After you've proven trustworthy, Mon Mothma replied firmly. Demonstrate that you can work within our framework without causing catastrophes. And we'll discuss giving you access to critical systems. Until then, consider yourselves allied independent agents on probationary status. It wasn't perfect, but it was workable. Batman nodded acceptance, and the rest of the League followed his lead. They'd operated under similar arrangements before, the UN, various national governments, even other superhero organizations. Autonomy with accountability. Freedom with responsibility. There's one more thing, Luke said hesitantly. Something I felt during the battle. All 7 of you, you're not connected to the Force, but there's still something there. A resonance. Like you're casting shadows in the Force even though you're not part of it. The Emperor has Sith agents who can sense that kind of disturbance. They'll hunt you specifically, trying to understand what you are. Let them try, Wonder Woman said with warrior's confidence. We've faced dark sorcerers and demonic entities before. Your Sith will find us more challenging than they anticipate. Don't underestimate them, Luke warned. The dark side grants power beyond anything you've encountered. The Emperor himself is, he struggled to find words. He's ancient evil made manifest. Vader is terrifying, but the Emperor is worse. Far worse. Then we'll face him if necessary, Superman said simply. Together. As a team. The meeting concluded with tense but functional agreement. As the League members filed out toward their assigned quarters, Leia pulled Batman aside. A word, detective. Bruce waited, knowing this conversation had been inevitable. You told me you gather information, Leia said quietly. That you're an expert at understanding people and situations. So tell me honestly, do you think we can win this war? The real answer, not comforting platitudes. Batman considered her question with the serious analysis it deserved. In your current state? No. The Empire has overwhelming numerical and technological superiority. They control most of the galaxy's resources and infrastructure. They can afford to lose battles because they have the industrial capacity to replace losses indefinitely. You can't. Leia's expression tightened, but she didn't look away. And with your help? Better odds, Batman admitted. But not guaranteed. The Justice League can shift tactical situations, win battles, save lives, destroy strategic targets. But we can't win the war for you. That requires political will, popular support, and sustainable military strategy. Things that take time and sacrifice to build. Honest, Leia said, echoing Flash's earlier comment. I appreciate that. You remind me of someone, Batman said unexpectedly. A colleague who leads through moral authority rather than fear. Someone who never gives up, even when the odds are impossible. He paused. If anyone can guide the rebellion to victory, Princess, my money would be on you. Leia allowed herself a small, tired smile. We'll see if that confidence is justified. She turned to leave, then stopped. Batman? Thank you. For saving those soldiers on Hoth. For bringing your team together instead of letting them operate blindly. And for being honest about the odds. We need allies who tell us hard truths, not just what we want to hear. Then you've got the right team, Batman replied. Welcome to the Justice League experience, we specialize in impossible situations. As he walked back to rejoin the others, Bruce couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just crossed a threshold. The Justice League was now formally involved in a galactic civil war. Whatever happened next, Earth's heroes would shape this galaxy's future. He just hoped they'd shape it for the better. 3 weeks into their alliance with the rebellion, the Justice League had learned what war looked like on a galactic scale, and it was grinding, thankless, and far more complex than any conflict they'd faced on Earth. Small victories in one sector meant devastating losses in another. Freed systems were recaptured within days. Every Imperial installation they helped destroy seemed to spawn two more. And always, the Empire's response escalated. The conference room aboard Home One had become their regular briefing space, though the atmosphere was far different now than during their first meeting. Familiarity bred not contempt but cautious collaboration. Rebel officers no longer flinched when flash vibrated through walls to deliver urgent messages. Aquaman had earned grudging respect by personally leading an underwater assault on an Imperial garrison on Mon Calamari. Wonder Woman trained with rebel commandos, teaching hand-to-hand techniques that didn't rely on superhuman strength. But success came with a price. The Empire knew about them now. Officially. Darth Vader had issued Imperial Security Bureau bulletins identifying 7 anomalous entities of unknown origin as high-priority targets. Bounty hunters across the galaxy competed for the astronomical credits offered for League members' capture. And Emperor Palpatine himself had supposedly expressed interest in the beings who existed outside the Force's influence. Today's briefing, however, focused on something different. Something that made even Batman's tactical genius strain against impossible variables. Admiral Akbar stood before the holographic display, his webbed hands manipulating tactical projections. Imperial intelligence has been decoded. We have confirmed the location of a key Imperial research facility on Scarif, a tropical world heavily fortified and containing classified weapons development projects. The hologram shifted to show a massive installation ringed by shield gates and defended by multiple Star Destroyers. Our sources indicate the facility contains technical readouts for a new superweapon. Specifications, vulnerabilities, everything we'd need to potentially counter it. Another Death Star? Superman asked, his voice tight. The destruction of Alderaan still haunted him, an entire planet, billions of lives, erased as a demonstration of power. The fact that he'd arrived after that atrocity gnawed at him constantly. We don't know what it is, Mon Mothma admitted. Only that it's classified at the highest levels and considered critical to the Emperor's long-term strategy. Retrieving those plans could give us a decisive intelligence advantage. Batman studied the display with detective's focus. Scarif is a fortress. Shield gate prevents orbital bombardment or insertion. Ground-based defenses make conventional assault suicidal. And according to your intelligence, they have multiple Star Destroyers in permanent orbit. He looked at Akbar. You're not proposing a raid. You're proposing a suicide mission and hoping we'll volunteer. We're asking for help, Leia corrected firmly. We have teams ready to infiltrate the facility, but they'll need support getting past external defenses. Your unique capabilities could provide that support. Translation: you want us to fight a delaying action while your operatives steal the data, Cyborg said, not accusingly, just stating facts. Draw Imperial fire, create chaos, give your people time to work. Yes, Mon Mothma said without hesitation. Is that something the Justice League can do? Wonder Woman's eyes met Batman's, an entire conversation happening in that glance. They discussed this possibility, using their powers to enable rebel operations rather than trying to win battles single-handedly. It was smarter tactically, more sustainable strategically. But it also meant accepting that they were war assets now. Not just heroes responding to emergencies. We'll do it, Superman said before Batman could respond. But on our terms. We coordinate the insertion, we control tactical decisions during the operation, and if your people are compromised, we extract them immediately. Non-negotiable. Agreed, Leia replied. When can you be ready? Give us 2 days to plan and prepare, Batman said. This kind of operation requires precision and intelligence we don't currently have. We'll need detailed facility layouts, patrol schedules, sensor configurations, everything your intelligence network can provide. You'll have it, Akbar promised. As the briefing concluded and people filed out, Luke Skywalker approached Flash, who'd been unusually quiet throughout the discussion. You okay? You seemed distracted. Barry Allen managed a weak smile. Just thinking about home. My wife. My friends. We've been gone 3 weeks now, and I keep wondering if time passes the same way in our universe. Are they searching for us? Do they think we're dead? He shook his head. Sorry, got dark there for a second. I understand, Luke said quietly. I lost people I loved to this war. It's okay to acknowledge that separation hurts, even when you're doing important work. Flash's smile became more genuine. You're wise for someone so young, you know that. The Force teaches patience and perspective, Luke replied. Though I'm still learning both. Hey, speaking of the Force, Flash leaned in conspiratorially, think you could teach me some of that? I mean, I know I'm not Force sensitive, but maybe there's overlap with the Speed Force. Both let you do impossible things with physics. Luke considered it. I don't see why not. Master Yoda always said the Force flows through all living things. Maybe in your universe, it manifests differently. We could experiment after the Scarif mission. It's a date, Flash said, then immediately winced. Not a date. A training session. You know what I mean. Luke laughed, and Flash vibrated away with embarrassed speed, leaving the young Jedi smiling. Despite everything, despite the war and danger and impossible odds, there were still moments of genuine connection between people from different universes trying to find common ground. 2 days later, the assault on Scarif began. The Justice League approached from high orbit aboard a modified Rebel transport, its hull configured to minimize sensor signature. Below them, the tropical world gleamed like an emerald surrounded by a lattice of Imperial military infrastructure. Shield gates glowed with contained energy. Star Destroyers maintained geosynchronous orbit. And somewhere on the surface, in a vault buried beneath palm trees and white sand beaches, lay intelligence that could change the course of the war. Remember the plan, Batman said over the team comlink, his voice steady despite the insanity they were about to attempt. Clark, Diana, and Arthur handle the shield gate, disable it long enough for rebel ground forces to insert. Hal, you're with me providing aerial cover and disabling anti-aircraft batteries. Victor, you're infiltrating Imperial networks to blind their sensors and open security doors for the ground team. Barry, your rapid response, wherever problems emerge, you solve them faster than Imperial Command can coordinate a response. Simple, Flash said with nervous energy. Invade an Imperial fortress world, steal classified intelligence, and escape before they can bring overwhelming force to bear. What could possibly go wrong? Everything, Batman replied. Which is why we adapt and improvise. Standard League Operation Protocol. The transport's cargo bay depressurized, and Superman, Wonder Woman, and Aquaman dropped toward the shield gate without hesitation. The gate itself was a technological marvel, an energy barrier that completely encapsulated the planet, preventing any unauthorized passage. It required massive power generation, sophisticated control systems, and supposedly couldn't be breached by anything short of sustained capital ship bombardment. The designers hadn't accounted for Superman. Clark hit the shield at full speed, his Kryptonian physiology, now fully adapted to the galaxy's stellar radiation after weeks of exposure, channeling absorbed solar energy into kinetic impact. The shield rippled, sparked, and destabilized as its systems struggled to process the impossible energy signature slamming against it. Wonder Woman followed an instant later, her divine-forged bracelets deflecting feedback energy while her strength added to the assault. And Aquaman, trident raised high, channeled ancient Atlantean magic through the weapon to create resonant frequencies that disrupted the shield's harmonic stabilization. The shield gate collapsed with a thunderous discharge of electromagnetic energy that registered on sensors across 3 star systems. For exactly 47 seconds, Scarif was defenseless from orbit. The rebel fleet, waiting in hyperspace, emerged in perfect coordination. Dozens of starfighters screamed toward the surface while larger cruisers engaged the Star Destroyers that were desperately trying to reacquire targeting locks. It was chaos, glorious and terrifying, and it bought the ground teams exactly the opening they needed. Batman and Green Lantern descended through the atmosphere aboard individual insertion pods, each one protected by ring-generated shields. Hal's charge was down to 42% now. Every engagement, every mission, drained reserves he couldn't fully replenish. But he'd learned to work smarter, creating constructs that were efficient rather than elaborate. A simple shield required less power than complex machinery. Basic geometric shapes consumed less willpower than detailed sculptures. Approaching anti-aircraft battery cluster 7, Hal reported, his ring identifying targets with emerald highlighting. Recommend simultaneous strike to prevent coordinated response. Agreed, Batman replied. Explosive gel charges on primary power couplings. Your constructs hit secondary systems. Execute on my mark. The battery cluster erupted in a sequence of precisely timed explosions that looked random but had been calculated to maximize disruption while minimizing collateral casualties. Batman had studied Imperial military architecture obsessively over the past 2 weeks, identifying weak points and exploitable design flaws. The Empire built for intimidation and efficiency, not resilience against unconventional assault. On the ground, the rebel insertion team, led by a determined soldier named Cassian Andor and accompanied by a reprogrammed Imperial droid, sprinted toward the data vault while Flash ran interference. Imperial stormtroopers appeared from defensive positions, weapons raised, and Barry Allen moved between them at speeds that made time itself seem negotiable. He didn't hurt them seriously, just disarmed, disoriented, and zip-tied them with plastic restraints from his suit's utility pouches. 73 stormtroopers neutralized in under 4 seconds. By the time Imperial Command realized what was happening, their ground forces were already compromised. Cyborg interfaced directly with the Imperial data network through a commandeered communications tower, his cybernetic components translating alien computer architecture into something he could manipulate. "I'm in," he reported. Disabling automated defenses around the vault. Opening security doors for the ground team. And, oh, that's interesting. Define interesting, Batman said sharply. The weapon they're researching here. It's called the Death Star. And according to these files, it already exists. Fully operational. The plans the rebels are stealing. Those are blueprints showing a single critical vulnerability built into its design, a thermal exhaust port that leads directly to the main reactor. The silence on the comm link was profound. They built another one. Superman's voice carried horror. After Alderaan, after everything, they built another planet killer. Worse, Cyborg replied grimly. This one is bigger. More powerful. And currently en route to rendezvous with the Emperor himself at some location designated Endor. If the Empire deploys this weapon, he didn't need to finish. Everyone understood the implications. Then we make sure the rebellion gets those plans, Wonder Woman said fiercely. Whatever it costs. The mission descended into desperate violence as Imperial forces realized what was being stolen. AT-ATs emerged from garrison facilities. TIE fighters swarmed despite rebel starfighter screams. And most ominous of all, Admiral Akbar's voice crackled over fleet channels with barely controlled alarm, Imperial reinforcements emerging from hyperspace. 2 Star Destroyers, no, 3. All fleet elements, prepare for. A massive shadow fell across the battlefield as something truly enormous dropped out of hyperspace. Not a Star Destroyer. Something that made Star Destroyers look like escort vessels. A Super Star Destroyer, bristling with enough firepower to reduce entire fleets to debris, and from its command tower, a presence that made every Force-sensitive being in the system recoil with instinctive dread. Darth Vader had arrived aboard the Executor, and he'd brought sufficient force to ensure the anomalies would not escape this time. Batman, Superman's voice was tight with recognition, we need to extract now. The ground team, the plans, everything, we grab it and run before. Before what? A voice boomed across all frequencies, mechanically filtered but unmistakably Vader's. Before I demonstrate the futility of resistance. Before I show you what true power means in this galaxy. A pause. You have interfered in Imperial operations for the last time, anomalies. Surrender the stolen data and submit to custody, or I will personally ensure every rebel ship in this system is reduced to atoms. Batman's mind raced through scenarios, probabilities, tactical options. They were outmatched. Outnumbered. Trapped between planetary defenses and an orbital blockade that could sustain fire indefinitely. The rebels were already taking catastrophic losses, 3 cruisers destroyed, dozens of starfighters gone. And Vader himself was descending toward the surface in a command shuttle surrounded by enough fighters to darken the sky. Victor, Batman said quietly. Do you have the plans? Copied to a data crystal, Cyborg confirmed. Ground team is extracting with the physical archives as backup. But boss, we're not going to make it to orbit at this rate. The Executor is shredding our fleet. Batman looked at Superman, who was still holding a section of the shield gate to prevent it from reactivating. At Diana, who'd just thrown an at Walker across a beach like a child's toy. At Hal, whose ring was down to 31% and dropping. At Barry, who'd been running continuously for 18 minutes and was starting to show signs of exhaustion even with his enhanced metabolism. They'd given the rebellion a fighting chance. The Death Star plans were secured. But getting them off-world would require a sacrifice that made Bruce Wayne's tactical mind scream in protest. League, he said, knowing they wouldn't like his next words. We need to split up. Half of us cover the rebel extraction. Half engage Vader directly and buy time for the fleet to escape. Bruce, no, Clark said immediately. We don't abandon each other. That's not how we operate. It's exactly how we operate when the stakes demand it, Batman replied. You know I'm right. Vader's here for us specifically, he's using the rebels as leverage. If we give him the fight he wants, the rebellion escapes with intelligence that could end this war. That's the mission. The silence that followed carried the weight of a decision that would define everything that came after. Wonder Woman made the choice for all of them, her voice carrying the authority of an Amazon general who'd commanded armies in conflicts that predated human civilization. Batman is correct. We divide our forces. Superman, Flash, and Cyborg, you escort the rebel fleet through the blockade and ensure those Death Star plans reach safety. Green Lantern, Aquaman, Batman, and myself, we hold the line against Vader and give them the time they need. Diana, Superman started to protest. This is not a debate, Kal-El, she interrupted, her eyes fierce with warrior's certainty. You are the strongest among us, Victor has the technical skills to interface with rebel systems during escape, and Barry's speed makes him ideal for rapid problem-solving during extraction. We 4 can survive direct confrontation with Vader long enough to matter. This is tactics, not sentiment. Clark's jaw tightened, but he knew she was right. He hated it, every instinct screamed to stay and fight beside his friends, but splitting the team gave the rebellion the best chance of escape. 30 minutes, he said finally. You hold for 30 minutes, then you disengage and rendezvous at the coordinates Akbar provided. No heroic last stands, no sacrificial plays. We all make it out alive. Agreed, Batman said, though they both knew such promises were meaningless once battle was joined. The Justice League separated, each group moving toward their designated objectives with practiced efficiency. Superman, Flash, and Cyborg streaked toward the rebel fleet, which was desperately trying to break through the Executor's devastating fire. Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Aquaman, and Batman descended to meet Darth Vader's shuttle as it touched down on Scarif's white sand beaches. The Sith Lord emerged from his transport surrounded by Death Troopers, elite Imperial Special Forces in black armor that absorbed light like hungry voids. Vader himself looked unchanged from their first encounter on Hoth, black cape billowing despite the tropical winds being insufficient to move it naturally, mechanical breathing that rattled like a death knell, and that pervasive presence that made the Force itself seem to recoil from his existence. 4 of you, Vader observed, his masked head tilting as he surveyed the heroes arrayed before him. The others flee with your stolen data. A predictable division of resources. His gloved hand gestured casually, and the Death Troopers moved into flanking positions with disturbing coordination. You believe you can delay me long enough for them to escape. You believe your powers make you invincible. You are wrong on both counts. We've fought gods and monsters, Wonder Woman replied, settling into a combat stance perfected over 3 millennia. We've stood against beings who could reshape reality with a thought. You're dangerous, Vader, perhaps the most dangerous individual we've encountered in this galaxy. But you're not invincible. Neither, Vader said softly, are you. The fight erupted with sudden, explosive violence. Green Lantern's ring blazed, manifesting a construct of massive siege cannons that fired emerald energy at Vader's position. The Sith Lord raised one hand, and the Force itself became a shield, deflecting the blasts in scattering arcs that detonated across the beach. Death Troopers opened fire with precision that suggested augmented targeting systems, their blaster bolts converging on Aquaman's position. Arthur's trident spun in a defensive pattern, deflecting energy bolts with the weapon's ancient Atlantean enchantments. He lunged forward, closing distance with the kind of aggressive assault that had served him in 1,000 underwater battles. But Vader was ready, his lightsaber intercepted the trident's prongs with impossible precision, the plasma blade screaming against magical metal. For a moment, they strained against each other, Aquaman's superhuman strength matched against Vader's force-enhanced power. Your weapon is old magic, Vader observed, his respirator maintaining steady rhythm despite the exertion. Forged in fires that predate your recorded history. Interesting. But insufficient. The Sith Lord twisted, using leverage and force manipulation to redirect Aquaman's momentum. Arthur stumbled, and Vader's free hand lashed out with telekinetic fury. The invisible pressure slammed into Aquaman like a physical wall, hurling him across 50 meters of beach to crash into a palm tree hard enough to snap the trunk. Batman was already moving, grappling hook launching toward Vader's position while his other hand primed explosive charges. He'd studied the Sith Lord's fighting style through every recording available, the precise economy of motion, the way Vader used telekinesis to supplement blade work, the psychological tactics designed to create fear and hesitation. Bruce had identified 17 exploitable patterns in Vader's combat methodology. None of which mattered when the Dark Lord could simply pluck Batman from mid-air with the Force and slam him into the sand hard enough to create a crater. The impact was brutal, driving air from Bruce's lungs and cracking the reinforced plating in his suit. Only the cowl's advanced shock absorption systems prevented immediate unconsciousness. You fight with intelligence and preparation, Vader said, his tone almost approving. Admirable qualities. But you are fundamentally human, detective. Limited. Breakable. The lightsaber rose for a killing strike. Wonder Woman's sword intercepted the blow, divine metal clashing against contained plasma in a shower of sparks. Diana drove forward with Amazonian fury, her blade moving in patterns that forced Vader into defensive postures. For the first time in the engagement, the Sith Lord actually retreated a step, recognizing a warrior whose skill matched his own. You are different from the others, Vader observed, his lightsaber weaving defensive barriers. Not enhanced biology or technological advantage. Something older. Divine blessing. The gods granted me strength to defend the innocent, Diana replied, her attacks relentless. And you, Sith Lord, prey upon the defenseless. That makes you precisely the kind of tyranny I was born to oppose. Their duel became a whirlwind of strike and counterstrike, each combatant pushing the other to their limits. Wonder Woman's 3,000 years of combat experience against Vader's mastery of lightsaber forms perfected through decades of warfare. Divine strength against dark side enhanced power. Ancient Amazonian battle wisdom against Sith tactical brilliance. Green Lantern provided support, his constructs creating barriers that forced Vader to divide his attention. A wall of solid willpower here, a battering ram there, artillery fire from unexpected angles, Hal fought like a one-man army, leveraging creativity to compensate for dwindling ring charge. 28% remaining. Every construct burned through reserves that couldn't be replaced. Aquaman recovered and rejoined the fight, his trident seeking openings while Diana pressed the direct assault. Batman coordinated from tactical positions, using smoke grenades and sonic disruptors to create chaos in Vader's sensory inputs. The four heroes fought with desperate synchronization, each covering the other's vulnerabilities, creating a battle rhythm that kept the Sith Lord engaged and unable to pursue the escaping rebels. For 18 minutes, they held. 18 minutes of sustained combat against one of the galaxy's most dangerous beings. Fighting on terrain that favored neither side, pushing themselves to absolute limits. And then Vader stopped playing defensively. The Sith Lord's presence in the Force exploded outward, a wave of crushing darkness that manifested as physical pressure. Every living thing on the beach, plants, insects, small animals, simply died, their life force snuffed out like candles in a hurricane. The four heroes staggered under the psychic weight, even though they weren't connected to the Force. It was like standing at the edge of a black hole's event horizon, feeling reality itself bend toward inevitable consumption. Enough, Vader declared, and his power made the word absolute. His lightsaber moved in a pattern too fast to follow, carving through Green Lantern's constructs like they were made of paper. Hal's ring charge dropped precipitously, 18%, 12%, 8%, as he desperately tried to maintain defenses that Vader shattered with contemptuous ease. The Sith Lord's telekinesis seized all four heroes simultaneously, lifting them from the ground and holding them suspended in invisible grips that constricted with crushing force. Batman felt ribs crack. Aquaman's armor groaned under the pressure. Diana's divine resilience was the only thing preventing immediate death, but even she couldn't break free. "You have fought well," Vader acknowledged, his respirator the only sound on the suddenly quiet beach. "Better than any opponents I have faced in years. But you are still finite beings with finite limits. And I am not." His fist clenched, and the pressure intensified. "Now you will." A crimson beam lanced down from the sky, carving through the sand between Vader and his captives with surgical precision. The Sith Lord was forced to release his telekinetic grip and dodge, his cape catching fire from the near miss. Everyone looked up to see Superman hovering at low altitude, his eyes still glowing with heat vision that could melt capital ship armor. "You were taking too long," Clark said flatly, descending to stand between Vader and his teammates. "The rebels are clear. The plans are secure. Which means I'm done letting you hurt my friends." "Superman, the plan was," Batman started, coughing blood. "The plan was 30 minutes. It's been 23. Close enough." Superman's gaze never left Vader. "You wanted to see what we can really do when pushed. Congratulations. You're about to find out." Behind him, Flash vibrated into view with Cyborg right behind. The speedster's grin was manic with nervous energy. "Did you really think we'd leave you hanging? Come on, Bats. We're the Justice League. We don't do the noble sacrifice while others escape thing. We all go home, or none of us do." Vader studied the reunited team, calculating new tactical scenarios. 7 anomalies, all combat-ready despite injuries. His Death Troopers were depleted, Batman's explosives and Aquaman's trident had eliminated most of them during the initial engagement. Orbital support was minutes away, but minutes might not be sufficient against beings who just proven they could coordinate against him effectively. The Sith Lord made a decision that surprised everyone. "Impressive," Vader said, deactivating his lightsaber. "You prioritize loyalty over strategic advantage. You risk everything for each other. The Jedi made the same mistakes, it destroyed them." He turned toward his shuttle. "The Death Star plans you stole will give the rebellion hope. False hope, for the Emperor's design is inevitable. But you have earned survival today through skill and determination. Go. Rejoin your rebel allies. We will meet again, and next time, I will be prepared for your unique capabilities. You're just letting us leave?" Diana asked suspiciously, her sword still raised. "I am allowing you to participate in your own destruction," Vader replied. "The more you aid the rebellion, the more they depend on your power. And when the Emperor finally springs his trap, and he will, your loyalty to these doomed freedom fighters will be the chain that binds you. Go. Fight. Believe you are making a difference." His respirator hissed. "It will make your eventual submission all the more satisfying." The Sith Lord's shuttle lifted off, leaving the Justice League standing on a battle-scarred beach, surrounded by evidence of combat that had pushed them to their breaking points. "That was ominous," Flash muttered. "Did he just threaten us while letting us win?" "He doesn't think we won," Batman said quietly, his tactical mind already analyzing Vader's psychology. "He thinks we're playing into some larger strategy we don't understand yet." "Then we learn the strategy," Superman replied. "We figure out what the Emperor is planning, and we stop it before it can trap us or the rebellion." He looked at his teammates, injured, exhausted, but unbroken. Together. Cyborg activated his communicator, connecting to the rebel fleet that was successfully jumping to hyperspace with the Death Star plan secured. "Home 1, this is Cyborg. Package is secure, ground team is mobile, and we're ready for extraction. Think you can spare a shuttle for some very tired interdimensional heroes?" Admiral Akbar's voice carried genuine warmth despite his species' natural gruffness. "Shuttle is inbound, Cyborg. And for what it's worth, you saved countless lives today. The Alliance owes you a debt we can never fully repay. Just help us get home," Cyborg replied. "That'll be payment enough." As they waited for extraction, watching TIE fighters circle at safe distance and Imperial forces regroup, Wonder Woman placed a hand on Superman's shoulder. "You came back for us. You risked the mission, defied tactical logic, and potentially compromised the rebel escape, all to ensure we weren't left behind." Clark managed a tired smile. "That's what the League, part of Justice League, means, Diana. We're strongest together. Always have been, always will be. Even in a galaxy far from home," she agreed. The shuttle arrived, and they boarded with the practiced efficiency of soldiers who'd survived another impossible day. As Scarif fell away beneath them and they accelerated toward hyperspace, each member of the Justice League contemplated the same fundamental questions. What was the Emperor planning? What trap had Vader referenced? And most importantly, were they helping the rebellion win their war, or were they being maneuvered into something far more dangerous than they understood? The answers would come soon enough. For now, they had the Death Star plans, they had each other, and they had hoped that their presence in this galaxy might actually matter. In the end, that hope would prove both their greatest strength and their most dangerous vulnerability. The viewport of Home 1's observation deck offered an unobstructed view of the stars, infinite points of light scattered across a darkness that seemed to stretch forever. Superman stood alone, his reflection ghostly against the transparisteel, contemplating a galaxy he never intended to visit and a war he never meant to join. 3 weeks had become 5. 5 weeks had become 2 months. And with each passing day, Earth felt more like a distant memory and the rebellion felt more like home. Behind him, the door hissed open. He didn't need to turn around to know it was Batman. Bruce's footsteps carried a distinctive rhythm that Clark could recognize across star systems. "The Death Star plans are being analyzed," Bruce said, moving to stand beside his oldest friend. "Rebel engineers confirm Cyborg's assessment, there's a vulnerability. A single proton torpedo, fired into a thermal exhaust port, could trigger a chain reaction that destroys the entire station. One shot," Clark said quietly. "One impossible shot to destroy a weapon that can obliterate planets." "The rebellion specializes in impossible shots," Batman replied. "They've survived this long through determination, sacrifice, and believing in causes larger than themselves. They'll find someone who can make that shot." Superman finally turned to face Bruce directly. "We helped them steal those plans. We fought Vader, disabled Imperial defenses, saved rebel lives. We're not observers anymore, Bruce. We're combatants in their civil war. Yes, Batman agreed simply. Does that trouble you? It troubles me that we still don't fully understand what we've walked into, Clark admitted. Vader said the Emperor has a trap planned. That our loyalty to the rebellion would be the chain that binds us. What if we're making things worse? What if our intervention causes the Empire to escalate in ways that kill more people than we save? Bruce was quiet for a moment, his detective's mind parsing moral complexities that had no easy answers. I've been analyzing Imperial and Rebel casualty reports for the past month. Comparing engagement outcomes before and after our arrival. The data is inconclusive. We've saved thousands of lives in direct interventions. But Imperial response has intensified, they're committing more resources to sectors where we operate, which means more collateral damage. So we are making it worse, Superman said, his voice heavy with the weight of unintended consequences. Or we're forcing the Empire to overextend, Batman countered. Spreading their forces thin, creating vulnerabilities that the rebellion can exploit. Wars aren't won or lost based on single variables, Clark. They're complex systems with cascading effects. Our presence changes the equation, but whether that change is ultimately positive or negative won't be clear until the war is over. That's not comforting. It's not meant to be comforting. It's meant to be honest. Batman's eyes reflected starlight, making them seem almost luminous behind the cowl. We're doing what we always do, standing between the innocent and those who would harm them. The scale is larger, the stakes are higher, but the fundamental principle remains unchanged. That has to be enough, because the alternative is paralysis through overthinking. The door opened again, admitting the rest of the Justice League. Diana carried herself with the bearing of someone who just finished intense combat training, probably teaching rebel commandos techniques that would keep them alive in close-quarters fighting. Hal's ring flickered faintly on his finger, its charge hovering at a dangerous 21% despite his careful conservation. Aquaman looked distinctly uncomfortable this far from any substantial water source, though he'd never complain. Flash vibrated slightly with nervous energy that had become his constant companion in this galaxy. And Cyborg interfaced with a datapad, his cybernetic component still working to understand the nuances of hyperspace technology. Meeting? Diana asked, reading the atmosphere immediately. Impromptu philosophical discussion, Batman replied. Clark's questioning whether we're doing more harm than good. We saved 843 lives on Scarif alone, Wonder Woman said firmly. Rebel soldiers, pilots, technicians, people who will continue fighting for freedom because we gave them the chance. That is not harm. That is exactly what we're supposed to do. But at what cost? Clark pressed. Every time we intervene, the Empire responds with greater force. We're escalating a conflict that was already devastating. The conflict was always going to escalate, Cyborg interjected, looking up from his datapad. I've been studying Imperial strategic patterns. They don't negotiate, they don't compromise, and they don't accept resistance. With or without us, the Empire would continue tightening its grip until every free system was crushed. We're not causing that, we're just visible enough that they blame us for complications they would have encountered anyway. Victor's right, Hal added, his voice carrying the weariness of someone operating on fumes, both literally and figuratively. I've fought in intergalactic conflicts before, as a Green Lantern. Authoritarian regimes always escalate when challenged. It's their nature. If we weren't here, the Empire would find other reasons to commit atrocities. At least this way, we're saving some people who'd otherwise be statistics. Flash, who'd been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. I've been thinking about the Reverse Flash. About Professor Zoom and all the times he tried to prove that my heroism was pointless because I couldn't save everyone. That trying to help just delayed inevitable tragedies. Barry's expression hardened with resolve. He was wrong then, and that thinking is wrong now. We can't save everyone, Clark. We can't prevent every tragedy. But we can save someone. And for those individuals, for those families who get to stay together because we intervened, we're their entire world. Superman looked at each of his teammates, seeing the same determination reflected in different ways. Diana's warrior's certainty, Bruce's tactical pragmatism, Hal's cosmic perspective, Arthur's fierce protectiveness, Victor's analytical confidence, Barry's optimistic heroism. They'd all chosen to stay and fight, to risk themselves for people they'd never met in a galaxy they'd never intended to visit. Because that's what heroes did. You're right, Clark said finally, his voice carrying renewed conviction. All of you. We can't control the Emperor's responses or predict every consequence of our actions. But we can choose to stand up when people need defending. That's enough. It has to be. So we continue helping the rebellion, Diana stated, not a question but confirmation of shared purpose. We continue helping the rebellion, Batman agreed. But carefully. Strategically. And always with the understanding that our primary goal remains finding a way home. Speaking of which, Cyborg said, pulling up holographic projections from his datapad, I've made progress on the dimensional gateway theory. Using Home 1's hyperdrive as a base, I believe I can create a modified boom tube that punches through to our home universe. The math is complicated, and there's about a 30% chance the whole thing explodes catastrophically, but it's theoretically possible. 30% chance of catastrophic explosion, Flash repeated. Those are not comforting odds, Vic. Better than the 0% we had a month ago, Cyborg replied. I need more time to refine the calculations and maybe access to an even more powerful hyperdrive system, but we're getting closer. Then we keep fighting alongside the rebels, Superman said. We help them survive long enough to use those Death Star plans. We protect as many people as we can. And when the opportunity presents itself, we go home to the people waiting for us. Agreed, Wonder Woman said, and the others echoed their consensus. They stood together in the observation deck, 7 heroes from another universe, watching stars that weren't their own and contemplating battles yet to come. They'd arrived in this galaxy by accident, scattered and confused. They'd been hunted, tested, and pushed to their limits. They'd made alliances with rebels and enemies of a Sith Lord whose power defied their understanding. And through it all, they'd remained what they'd always been, the Justice League. Earth's mightiest heroes, standing together against tyranny, fighting for the innocent, and refusing to surrender even when the odds seemed impossible. The galaxy far, far away had never encountered anything quite like them. Neither had the Justice League ever faced a conflict on such vast scale, with consequences that rippled across thousands of worlds. But as they prepared for the battles ahead, the assault on the Death Star, the inevitable confrontation with Emperor Palpatine, the desperate struggle to find their way home, one truth remained constant. Together, they were unstoppable. Together, they could face gods, emperors, and Sith Lords. Together, they would prove that heroism transcended universes, that justice was universal, and that hope could shine even in the darkest corners of a galaxy consumed by war. The Force might bind all living things in this reality. But the Justice League answered to something deeper, the fundamental belief that doing right mattered, that protecting the innocent was worth any cost, and that giving up was never an option. Darth Vader had promised they would meet again. The Emperor's trap still waited, hidden in shadows. And somewhere across the dimensional void, Earth remained separated from its greatest champions. But the Justice League had faced impossible odds before. They'd died and returned, fought across realities, and stood against threats that could reshape existence itself. One galactic civil war, no matter how vast, was just another day at the office. And they were just getting started.